Inception Marketing, hashtag Inception Marketing. I want to be clear, all the giveaways are not about that. The giveaways are about your engagement with me during this program, making sure that you're asking questions and testing out content and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's all the sort of preamble that I need to give you as the live studio audience, and we're just about ready to switch over and start recording the program. I just want to check a couple things with the team. Are we all technically good? All right, and can you guys switch over to dialogue? Can you switch over to the dialogue? Because right now I've just got my feed. So AJ, if you could switch that over so that you're able to speak to me and send questions to me. Cool. I don't need to see me down there. Cool. All right. So with that in mind, guys, let's just run through, the text window where you're going to type questions to me. Okay. Because those are too small for me to read, so that sounds good. All right. Are you guys excited? I am really excited. I really am, because we've been wanting to do this for a very long time, and it's been in the planning, and I'm really, really grateful to be able to share this with you. One last thing before we jump in. The program is broken up into 9 modules, and those 9 modules are designed to be shared with you in a specific order, right? You'll find once we've gone through these 9 modules that you can actually do this in other orders, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the program. When I'm in recording mode, I'm going to run through the steps, and I won't be taking any questions. And as I said, at the end of each module, I'm going to stop, and the team is going to feed me questions that I can take care of for you. So there we go, guys. Here we go. Oh, by the way, remember that you're in a live studio audience. So that means that if I feel like I need to stop and retake something, you might have to see a few things twice, because I might stop and retake because we are recording a program here. So bear with me, and we're going to jump right in. Okay, so where are we? Yes. All right. Hi there, welcome to the Inception Marketing Video Training Program. I'm Eric Edmeades. I'm the founder of Business Freedom and the creator of Inception Marketing. And I'm really glad that you're here for this training right now, because it's really, really effective. For many business owners, they run into this problem of, struggling through how to get business, how to get new clients, how to get their clients to buy more often. And the more time they're struggling with that question, the less time they're struggling with other things like socially important issues, like hiring more people, like how they want to give back to their community, building scalability, and ultimately creating a powerful organic business. So what I want to share with you is that this program can absolutely unlock the marketing potential of your company. It really can. Here's the way I want you to think about marketing. If you think about marketing like this, that imagine it as a resource, like a plumbing resource, where when you would like more revenue in your business, it's like a tap. You turn it on and revenue comes into your business. And when you're kind of full up, you know what I'm talking about? Like you're really, really busy, then you can turn down or turn off the tap and stop the flow of business until you've handled that level of growth. That's how marketing should really be. And I'll share with you that in many of my businesses, we've been able to do that very, very, very effectively by using the strategies that I'm going to share with you in this program. You might be familiar with my company, WildFit. As an example, in WildFit, all of our marketing has been based on inception marketing and client feedback, or word of mouth. And I want to share with you that that's led to us being in a situation where our company posted over 1,000% growth last year. And many of our clients, while the programs are all about health transformation, diet, nutrition, and that sort of stuff, many of our clients were never, ever, ever in the market for a health program. But because of the way that we use strategic marketing and the way our clients use our strategic marketing, it means it attracts people into the program that weren't otherwise thinking about it. Now, that's a very important point. So over the course of this program, we're going to run through a number of steps. We're going to run through 9 steps, step by step by step. They're going to show you how to play chess with your marketing instead of playing darts. Here's what I mean. Very often in marketing, we tend to think of, okay, there's my target, and how can I get to my target? And we throw a dart, boom, we're just going to try and get to the target. What we're going to do over the course of the next, see, there's an example of a cut, guys. All right. What we're going to do over the course of this program is we're going to learn how to play chess from a marketing perspective. We're going to play chess. So we're going to be moving our pieces around the board long before we're ever thinking about the transactional reality of making the sale. This is very, very important. Let me stop for a moment. Have you ever had resistance selling? Maybe you're trying to sell a product or service, or maybe you are trying to raise money for your company. Have you ever felt a little bit of resistance about that? If you're in the majority, you have. And what I want to suggest to you is that when you really use strategic marketing, when you use it effectively, what ends up happening is your prospects are warmed up so much that you're not having to do persuasive selling, that what you're really doing is order taking or technical selling, where people are already asking you questions. Look, we both know that when somebody asks a question like, how much is it? Is there a payment plan? When can I have delivery? Do you deliver? Et cetera, et cetera. When they're asking questions like that, you know that they're already curious, that they're already thinking about buying. Isn't that interesting? So what I want you to think about is, what if we stop thinking so much about how to get the sale and we started thinking a lot more about how to get people curious? Are you with me? So what we're doing is playing chess. We're not going to go straight for the sale. We're going to start getting people to be curious about the product so that they're already in their mind or even out loud asking buying questions, qualifying themselves as a buyer. I also want to share with you that there's an important principle in selling, and that is, what time frame are you considering when you're having a sales conversation with a client? Very often when we have resistance to selling, it's because we're thinking about the wrong time frame. Often it means that we're thinking about the next few minutes where we might get rejected, right? What if we change the time frame a little bit? What if you looked out into your prospect's future? What if you looked out into their future and imagined their future with your product and also imagined their future without your product? Do you think that might change the way you look at sales? So I want to give you a really fun example of this. A very long time ago, I worked for a company in Vancouver, Canada. And one of the employees at the company was a born-again Christian. This is no judgment on religion. It's just a funny story. And it packs home this very, very powerful message about selling. As a born-again Christian, it was his job, his responsibility to attempt to save me from my existing life. I was living in sin with a girlfriend, and he felt like we shouldn't be doing that if we weren't married. Again, I'm not debating the beliefs here. I'm just telling you his model of the world. And he would continually try to save me. He would save me and save me and save me and try to save me some more. And it became a bit of a running joke that I would come to the office and wonder what kind of saving he was going to do this time. And then finally one day, he invited me over to his house to have dinner. He says, hey, do you want to come over to my house, have dinner? And I'm like, well, okay, you and I both know why he was inviting me over to his house for dinner, don't we? It was going to be a conversion conversation. I was going to come over to his house and have dinner. And when I got there, it was going to be all about how I need to accept his Savior into my life and how I should come to the church and all that kind of stuff. But as he was a friend and as I found the whole thing kind of entertaining, I went over for dinner. I got to his house and I knocked on the door and the door opened. Now, I'd never met his wife before, but my friend wasn't, he was like he was a nice guy. He was kind of nondescript. He wasn't particularly tall, wasn't particularly short. He was maybe shaped more like a potato than a carrot. He was a nice guy, but like I say, a little nondescript. And then when the door opened, I saw his wife. Now, his wife was technically beautiful, right? I mean, there's all kinds of beautiful, but she was technically beautiful. What I mean is that she could have graced the covers of any fashion magazine anywhere in the world. Super tall and super technically beautiful. I open the door, I take one look at her, and I suddenly realized why he believed in God. I got it. I mean, I was thinking, where do I sign up? I'm kidding. Anyway, they welcomed me in, and we went for dinner. I went to the dinner table, and as we were sitting around the dinner table, they started speaking to me about religion and about God and about, accepting Jesus and all this kind of stuff. And finally, I stopped and I asked them, I said, you've been trying to do this for like a year, and it's not working. So at what point do you give up? Because, I'm curious, because I can tell you now it's not going to work, and you may as well just give up. So, what would it take for you to give up? And he says, oh, I don't think you understand. I said, what don't I understand? He says, there are two things you don't understand if you think I can give up. I said, what are they? And he goes, the first thing is that I literally believe my religion, his product. I literally believe in my religion, which means that if you continue to live the way you're living and you don't accept Jesus into your life, then you're going to spend eternity burning in hell. And eternity is a very long time. The second thing that you might not understand is that I really love and respect you, so I don't want you to have that eternal future. I was like, I totally get it. if that's his core operating principle, if he completely believes in his product, his religion, and he respects me at all, then he's going to do whatever it takes to prevent me having that future. I'm in. I understand. That makes sense. I said, keep trying to save me. I mean, it's not my choice. It's not my own spiritual practice, but in his world, I'm like, keep trying to save me. Now, I want you to think about this. I want you to understand for a moment that what we're talking about here is a level of belief that is so powerful that he can't hear the word no. All he ever hears is, I don't know enough yet. Are you with me? Does that make sense? He doesn't hear no. He doesn't hear I'm not interested. He just hears I'm not interested yet. No, I don't know enough yet. Very, very interesting. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to be that hardcore in our selling. What I'm suggesting is that the next time you feel a little resistance about talking to a prospect, about buying a product or service you're selling, or talking to an investor about investing in your business, for example, what I want you to do is really evaluate how strong is your belief in what you're doing and how much do you respect that person. Because here's the thing. I want you to take a look at their future and imagine their future where they did buy your product or service, and imagine their future where they didn't. Now, I can tell you that in my life, that's really easy. When people come to me and they're curious about doing our business programs, I'm really clear. I take a look at their business life. If they don't do our business products, hey, they may well be successful, but I know all kinds of shortcuts. I've made a ton of mistakes out there. So I have a pretty good sense of some of the things they're about to do in their business. And I can see them going through that pain. But then equally, I can see them on the other path where I'm able to help them avoid some of those things. And when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to see that, when I'm able to juxtaposition the potential pain versus the potential pleasure, it makes it very easy for me to be persuasive about them doing our programs. For those of you who are familiar with WildFit, you'll really understand this. In WildFit, somebody comes up to me and has a conversation with me about whether or not they should change their lifestyle habits a little bit, whether they should take a new look at the food manufacturing industry and their relationship with food. It's really easy for me. I can look down their one future where they don't do that, and I can look down the other future where they do. Let me tell you what's down the future if they don't do that. 1 in 3 people, heart disease, 1 in 3 people, cancer, and on and on and on. Now, I'm not saying we can prevent all of those things. What I'm saying is that people's likelihood of having an unpleasant future and maybe a shortened life is much higher if they don't take a new look at their lifestyle and don't take a new look at their relationship with the food manufacturing industry. And if they do take a look at those things, they likely are going to live longer, but more than that, their quality of life is going to be a lot higher. And so when they're standing there going, I'm hesitating a little, I'm very happy to help push them over the edge. Does this make sense? I hope so. And there's one more thing we can do that's even more important than that tenacity and that belief. And that is lay the groundwork. Lay the groundwork so that they're already so curious about your product. They're already so curious about your program that they absolutely want to know more. And then they're asking buying questions. And you and I both know that, first of all, that means they're a lot closer to a buying decision. And secondly, it also means that you're going to feel better because you feel like you're not needing to persuade so much. Does this make sense? Okay, so that's what this 3 days is going to be about, is how to lay that groundwork so that people naturally arrive at the conclusion that maybe they should be buying from you. In fact, let me give you something. Write this down. Grab a pen and paper or a keyboard or whatever you want, but capture this. In fact, I'll tell you what, the first person that puts this in the comments, the first person that is able to put this in the comments, no typos, will get our first giveaway. How about that? Oh, that's not for editing. That's for you guys that are live. That's not in the program. All right, so inception marketing. I would like to define it for you so you really get where we're going with this. Inception marketing is about developing stories and delivering heavily researched and engaging stories that your prospects want to hear, that will subtly move them. Hang on a second, guys. Hold on a second, guys. One thing. Cut for record, not cut, but just, editing cut there. Okay, I want to make sure I get the quote right since I told everybody they have to get the quote right themselves. So I better get it right too, right? Are you guys good with this? All right. So inception marketing is an incredibly powerful and strategic marketing campaign that's made up of using powerful inceptive stories. So what is an inceptive story? An inceptive story is a heavily researched and engaging story that your prospects want to hear and that will subtly move them to the realization that they both want and need your product service, or company, and that they should only buy from you. All right, so I'm going to do that one more time. I want to get this really clear to you. An inceptive story is a heavily researched and engaging story that your prospects want to hear and that will subtly move them to the realization that they both want and need your product or service and that they should only buy it from you. All right, whoever gets, cut from editing, for you guys, whoever gets the most correct version of that first into the chat is going to get our first giveaway. We'll do that during the Q&A. All right, back to recording. So with that in mind, we're going to go through the 9 steps of inception marketing over the course of this program and in 9 individual modules. The way it's going to work is I'm going to share with you how that module works and what you need to know to complete that step. And then I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and do that step. So I want you to be really clear. While this is an education program that you're watching, it's also a workshop that you're taking actual action on. And so I'm going to, at the end of each module, I'm going to give you an assignment. And here's the thing, if you really want to get value from this program, if you really want to transform the sales and marketing of your business, if you really would like to double, triple, or even way more than that, multiply your sales, then be more than just passive. Get involved, and at the end of each module, do your assignment. So with that, welcome to the Inception Marketing video training, and I'll see you over on module 1, where we're going to talk about overall target markets. Okay, cool. So guys, there's our first start. I'm not going to take questions at this point, but I am curious as to do we have somebody who's given us the definition for inceptive story in the comments. I'm sorry I sprang that on you guys. Do we have that in there?
There's so many of them that we have to go through and see who got it exactly.
Oh, don't even worry about it. The first person who gave a good attempt, just pull one up. Okay. Let's have it right now. Hang in, guys. We're going to get it. We're going to find out. And while they're doing that, I'll figure out what we're going to give away. Keep track of what we give away. For this one, you know what? For this one, we're going to give away the final recorded product, a $2,500 value. We're going to give away the final recorded product. So can somebody give me a...
Okay, so it's Vida. I read, we picked a name that we can't even read. V-I-D-Y-A.
Vidya?
Vidya.
I know Vidya. Vidya?
You know Vidya?
Yeah,
there
yeah.
You go.
If it's the Vidya, I think it is. She's a very, very vocal and fun WildFit client. Vidya, you win. You're going to get the first free copy of the Inception Marketing video training. When it gets edited, you will get the first copy of it. So you guys have her details, contact her, make sure you're in. Live? All right. So now, guys, we're going to jump into module 1, overall target markets. And then after that, we'll take some. So I've seen some questions coming in already. You can wait to show me questions until we go into the Q&A, AJ. Cool. All right. So we're going to go to overall target markets, module number 1. Going over to recording now. Actually, just a sip of water time. All right. Welcome back. Inception marketing, and now we're talking about overall target markets. Module 1 of the Inception Marketing video training is all about your overall target markets. And right here, you're going to begin to see that this is going to be a little bit different than your average marketing training, because often one of the very first things that marketing experts and consultants suggest is that you niche yourself, that you have to have a very, very tight niche. And that's extremely valuable information. It really is, and we're going to address that. But before we niche, what we really need to know is everybody that we would like to sell to. One of the challenges is that when a marketing consultant or a marketing expert tells their clients to develop a niche market, and you've probably heard this before, what happens sometimes to the client at that point is a sense of constriction or limitation. They start feeling like, wow, I'm really limiting the market that I can reach. They start feeling limited, and as a result of feeling limited, well, they start developing feelings of scarcity, and then often they go back to the widely cast type of marketing. They go back to non-niched marketing. And so what I'm going to share with you now is that actually, in order to do this effectively, what we really want to do is start with your overall target market. Who are all of the people that you would like to sell to? And this is a very important thing. And so I want you to give some thought right now as I'm speaking about this to who are all of the people that you would actually like to sell to? Who are all of the companies that you would actually like to sell to? At the end of the day, who is everyone that you would like to sell to? Now, for some of you, that might be really simple. If they breathe and have a heartbeat, you want to sell to them. Others of you might have something that's a little bit more narrow because maybe you're geographically constrained. You want to sell within your city or within your country, or you're selling to specific types of companies. So your overall target market could be as wide as everyone, or it could be a more narrow segment, but not very narrow. At this point, what we want to do is be very clear about the overall reach you would like to have. I'll give you some examples. In my very first company, we were selling data capture solutions and wireless networking systems and related technologies, mobile computing and so on. So who was our overall target market? Basically, any company that was using or may potentially use that technology. Any company. They could be a logistics company like UPS or TNT. They could be a retail company like around the world. You might know Safeway or Debenhams or Spar. It could be any number of companies that might have a need for mobile data capture, barcode scanning, barcode printing, wireless networking, and so on. So our overall target market, as you can imagine, was very, very wide. On the other hand, if we take a look at a company like WildFit, our overall target market there is pretty much anybody breathing. I mean, and if they're not breathing, we're going to teach them how to do that properly. Kidding. The point is that our overall target market there is pretty much everybody. So what I want to be very clear about when you start thinking about what your overall target market is this, that you don't qualify them too much. And here's what I mean by that. And listen very carefully to what we call limiters, right? You don't want to put any limiters on your overall target market. Very often at a live event, I will ask people, who's your overall target market? And the answers I very frequently get from people are people who are interested in, people who would like to buy, people who are curious about, et cetera, et cetera. Do you hear the limiters, right? So for example, at WildFit, if we said that our overall target market was everybody in the world who is interested in improving their health, we have just cut down the market size dramatically, because what we've tried to do is go after the low-hanging fruit of the people who are interested in. And the people who are interested in is a very small segment of the market often, right? And also, if they're already interested in it, then who are they already looking for? You and your competitors. When you can get much clearer and you can go after a wider market, you can become what we call the point of conversion, where somebody goes from disinterested or unaware to interested. And if you're the company or you're the person who facilitated that transfer, then you're going to have a much easier time selling to that person and a higher degree of loyalty. So when you're developing your overall target market, you want to cast as wide a net possible. And what you want to do is avoid any limiters where it looks like you're going after low-hanging fruit. Here's a funny thing. I'm going to teach you right now something you were not expecting at all to learn during the marketing program. I'm going to teach you how to catch a monkey. Do you want to know? Maybe you've heard this example before, but bear with me. It's really important. You see, catching a monkey is pretty simple. As smart as they are, there's some issues. And I share with you how they work. If you want to catch a monkey, you take a jar and glue it down to the ground. And you make sure the jar has a mouth that's just big enough for a hand to go in. You've probably heard this, right? But not big enough for the hand to come out if it's holding anything. Then you put some yummy nuts in there. Walk away. The monkey will walk over, reach their hand into the jar, grab onto the nuts, and then try to pull their hand out. Can't get their hand out. You can walk right up to them and they'll be screaming and freaking out because they're terrified, but they've got these nuts and they're holding on to them and they just won't let go, and they just won't let go. And you've caught yourself a monkey. I'm going to put to you, it was probably a male monkey, but the point is that when you're holding on to the monkey nuts like that, it makes it really difficult to really explore the opportunities that are available to you in marketing. And so the monkey nuts in marketing very often are low-hanging fruit. In other words, I'm interested in selling to companies that are interested in data capture systems or people that are interested in their health. So what I want to suggest to you is that your overall target market should be a very wide net, and it should not be limited by the market psychology, because you might end up being, as a result of this program, the point of conversion that takes the people who are not interested and makes them interested. And I want to give you one more important point about that, very important point. You see, if you are out there selling to the ready buying market, the interested people, then what you're doing is putting yourself into the market of highest competition. You may be familiar with the book Blue Ocean Strategies. It's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. And I feel in reading it that it's a little bit more applicable to a large tech company. A lot of the examples are very, very large companies. And I want to suggest to you that to a large degree, inception marketing is like blue ocean strategies for the rest of us. And what I mean by that is that what we're going to do is take people away from going after that very small, narrow, competitive market. Look, if they're already interested, then they're doing their research, and you're going to end up having to discount your price to compete or increase your service to compete. You're going to be competing in this small pool of monkey nut clients. Whereas if you can cast a wider net because you're playing chess, because you're strategic, and you can convert the people who are not interested or unaware or even opposed to you, if you can convert those people, you're going to create a much higher level of loyalty and a much lower need to compete on price. That's what this program is going to be about. Also, I want you to think about it numerically. I have done this in audiences all over the world, where I will ask the audience, like, how many people in this room right now are thinking about buying a new mobile phone, a new car, a new pair of running shoes, a new anything? And here's what happens. The number is always around about 3 to 5%. About 3 to 5% of the market is currently interested in buying whatever it is you're selling. Well, that's a very small market. So what if we figured out how to play the right kind of chess, how to develop the right kind of strategy, so the other 90% plus of the market became interested buyers? How powerful would that be for you? That's what this program is ultimately about. So in order for this to work really effectively, your first assignment is really, really simple. It's to come up with your dream list of overall target market. Like what is the definition of everybody that you would like to sell to? Every company, every person, whatever your market is, and whatever geography it is, everybody that you ultimately would like to sell to without any limiters on their desire to buy, right? So you're not going to be saying everybody interested in or everybody that's already buying or any of that kind of stuff. It's going to be the widest possible overall target market that you might want to reach one day. That's your assignment. Go ahead and do that now, and I'll see you in Module 2. All right. Now, guys, I hope that was interesting for you. It's going to get a lot deeper as we go into the modules, but this is this step that we've just done now around the overall target markets, it's extremely powerful. It's really important because what happens when you do this overall target market is it releases this idea of possibility. Most marketing experts come along and say niche, 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 and then people start feeling really, really constrained. We're going to talk about how to niche, but we're going to talk about how to do it super strategically, and we're going to show you that you don't have to have one niche, you could have 100 of them. When you really understand the principles of inception marketing, you're going to be able to go after countless niches with super effective marketing campaigns that are going to create really powerful conversion for you. So with that in mind, what I'd like from you guys is a couple of things. I think the team's got some questions that people have got for me. And then the next thing is that if you would like to give me some samples of what your overall target market is, then I'm going to tell you, hey, yeah, I think that's a good overall target market, or I might offer you the opportunity to improve it a little bit. So my first one here, so a couple things just technically. AJ, is it not possible for you to cut and paste?
Not right now.
It's not working? Okay, so that's okay. Then the next thing is, so yeah, let's take a couple of questions. And then if you can also do the, I'd love to see some of people's overall target markets that they've defined.
I might be able to get someone else to cut and paste for me.
Okay. Hang on, guys. Apparently, we're just solving a small technical problem. So hold on for one moment. While we're doing that, I hope you guys also really enjoyed that section on the tenacity of selling. I really want to hammer that point home too. It's really important. Like, I just want you to think about that. Whenever you start to feel a little resistance coming up about selling or persuading or any of that kind of stuff, whenever you feel a little bit of resistance in that area, then what I want to suggest to you is really, truly just stop for a moment and imagine the person's future with your product and without your product. It's a very interesting exercise because if you really believe in your product or service and you care about the prospect, when you see the potential pain that they might be in if they don't buy from you, and you see the potential future where they did buy from you and you were able to help them solve whatever problem it is, it really makes it easier to be willing to do what it takes to help them get there. So I want you to think a little bit about that when it comes to that sort of, if you ever feel a little bit of that resistance in a selling market, or in a selling situation. All right, so Is that one of the questions?
Yeah.
That I feel a little like Bill O'Reilly on the we're gonna do it live. I have no idea what that means. Okay, guys, here we go. Can you give me that top one? Or okay, first question in here, and we will solve this question thing and get it faster for you real quick. So the first question here comes in from Raul Sanchez. How do you approach a two-sided market? A website builder where the client is the web developer and the consumer is the business owner. Do you go after the developers or after the business owner? Well, Raul, that's a really good question. So let's talk about that in terms of your overall target market. You should have both of them in your overall target market. And that's a very, very good distinction in the overall target market exercise, is that you might actually have more than one overall target market. What I mean is that some people will be able to have a very simple explanation of what an overall target market is to them. They'll be able to have one sentence: I want to sell to everybody, or I want to sell to everybody between 18 and 45, or I want to sell to all women in this situation. They might have one sentence, but in your case, because you've got a two-sided transaction, you might be saying, hey, I want to go after all web developers and also all companies that might have, or should have a website. So you'd have these two different overall target markets. Now, when it comes to choosing which one you're going after in what order, I think when we get into the next step, your question will be easier to answer. But what I would suggest to you is this: you go after the one that is going to be most impactful for your business at any given moment in time. And we'll talk a lot more about that when we go into the ideal target market section. So I hope that begins to answer your question, and I know that the next section will do even a better job. Okay, next question here. What if this is Jan Davidson. Hi, Jan, good to have you here. What if my market is wine drinkers? Isn't that already broad? How might I go wider? Well, Jan, if your product was something other than wine, I might say wine drinkers and anybody who might be interested in becoming wine drinkers. As I'm not really interested in taking people who don't currently drink and getting them to drink, I think that wine drinkers is probably a good market. That said, let's be really clear that when you have an overall target market like wine drinkers, the question is, aren't there a lot of different types of people who drink wine? Like there are some people who, they just go into a bar and order the cheapest whatever wine they can have to get through the night. And then you have another person who's kind of like after a slightly better flavor. And then there's the other people who can like, hey, I think I get a whiff of pine cone and kitty litter. And I don't know, I'm not into wine, so I don't understand how they do that. But what I'm getting at is you have like sort of connoisseur level wine drinkers and you have casual wine drinkers. And so what I would suggest to you is that having an overall target market of all wine drinkers could be really fascinating. effectual marketing. One of the things that I often do at my live events is I'll jokingly divide the audience up into two and assign them with two different marketing projects. One marketing project is, for the one team, sell to everyone in the country. All ages, all sexes, all religions. Create a marketing campaign that appeals to every single person in the country. On the other hand, I'll tell the other half of the audience that what I'd like them to do is to develop a marketing campaign for one guy, Fred Johnson. And Fred is a mid-level marketing executive at a manufacturing firm. He's got 3 kids. He enjoys bowling and cross-country skiing, and he likes donating his time and money to children's charities and conservation projects. So go for it. Is this a remotely fair marketing exercise? No, not at all. These people have an impossible project, and these people have an unbelievably easy project because they have a very clearly defined ideal target market. One person, one psychology. Over here, they have like a million different psychologies and a whole bunch of different drivers and values. It's an impossible project. So when we dive deep and look at our ideal target markets, what we're really trying to do is figure out narrow segments of people that we would like to approach. Now, before we go into that, what we also have to recognize is that sometimes we want to go after an ideal target market that is a direct target, and sometimes we want to go after an ideal target market that is an indirect target. This is what I mean. Very often when we're working with inception marketing, we realize that the best way to sell is not necessarily to sell directly to the prospect, but it's to sell through someone else. It's to recognize that someone else can be a referrer, someone else can be an advocate, and that they can actually help to raise a lot more clients for you. And so that sometimes that's where your marketing effort should go. I'll give you an example of an architectural firm, or not an architectural firm. I'll give you an example of a private home building construction company. So their specialty was building custom homes for people. And they came along to us and said, hey, can we do a project where we bring in a lot more clients? We want to double the number of customers we have. Great, how many customers do you have now? Well, it turns out they were building about 15 homes per year. Okay, cool, they were building 15 homes per year. Now they wanted to build 30 homes per year. So they had a marketing budget, and almost the entire marketing budget was being spent trying to go out and find new clients that wanted to have their homes built. That seems reasonable. But what we first did is take a look at their existing market and existing clients. And what we found out is that about 7 or half of all their clients last year had come as referrals from an architectural firm that they were doing some business with. So in other words, one architectural firm had brought them 7 of their clients, almost half of their sales from the previous year. And yet all of their marketing budget was out there trying to get new clients. So all of their marketing budget brought in half of their clients, and one architect brought in the rest. The first thing I had to ask at that point is, did you thank this architect? And I mean more than just a phone call. Because if that's me, I'm sending the architect and his husband or wife out to a spa for the weekend. I'm doing something special for them because they are obviously very important to my business. But then doesn't it raise another question? And that is, shouldn't we perhaps spend some of our marketing trying to get new architects? Think about that, right? We're spending all this money on marketing trying to get new private buyers. But wait a second now. What if we took a lot of that marketing budget and effort and spent it going after more architects? One architect has brought in 7 houses. Couldn't another architect do the same thing? And so when we develop our ideal target markets, we want to make sure that we keep indirect target markets as an option as well, or people that might be referring business to us. Then, of course, we want to go after direct target markets. In other words, who we actually want to sell to directly. And so what we want to do is take a look at, and what you want to do is take a look at your overall target market that you defined in Module 1, and now start to think about how to subdivide it. Now, there's some obvious ways to subdivide it. You could subdivide it by geography or by age or various demographics along those lines. What we ultimately want to end up, though, is with a subdivision that creates a bunch of very specific psychological niches where you're talking to a specific psychology. Look, if I want to sell, let's say pet toys, pet food, that kind of stuff, who's my overall target market? Well, my overall target market might be anybody who has pets or who may have pets at some point. My overall target market, right? So the trouble is that if I try and design an ad that appeals to all of those people, you know, I'll probably get some throughput, monkey nuts, right? I'll get the interested people and they might come through. I mean, I'll have to compete on price because they're also looking at everybody else. But if I were to subdivide that, I could start looking at some of the sub-psychologies inside that overall target market. So for example, are cat owners and dog owners having pets for the same reasons? Well, okay, I know some people have both dogs and cats, but let's be really clear. People who buy cats, who have cats in their home, are really have a slightly different reason for having pets than people with dogs, don't you think? I mean, I sometimes joke that dog owners are people who wanted a best friend. They wanted a new best friend. Cat owners wanted a roommate that wasn't going to pay rent. I'm kidding. I love cats as well. I'm just kind of pointing out that dog owners and cat owners might have a different psychology. Isn't it true that maybe reptile owners have a totally different psychology? And then fish owners. And then what about the different dog breeds even, right? Is somebody with a Chihuahua facing the same issues as somebody with a Great Dane? I don't think so, right? So what we have to recognize is that all these different psychologies create an opportunity for us to create much better targeted marketing as we go through the balance of the steps here in the Inception Marketing Training. So what we first want to do is break down that overall target market into some narrow targeted markets that we can really target effectively. I'm going to give you a really good example. Imagine that I was going to write a book about dog training, right? Well, who would my overall target market be? Anybody who has a dog or might have a dog. Okay, fair enough. So with that in mind, I might write this book and the cover of it might say dog training, easy steps, whatever the case may be. But I want you to imagine for a moment that you are, let's say, the owner of a Siberian Husky. And you go into a pet store and you want to buy a book on dog training. So you walk in and you see this book and it says Dog Training, the Ultimate Guide. But then you look over and there's a whole book cabinet and it's full of books that all are branded similarly. But the one says The Ultimate Guide to Training Huskies. And another one says The Ultimate Guide to Training Chihuahuas. And another one says The Ultimate Guide to Training Golden Retrievers. Which book do you think you're more likely to buy? The generic Ultimate Guide to Training All Dogs, or the more specific Ultimate Guide to Training your species, the one you've got, your breed of dog? What do you think? Well, I'm thinking you're going to go for the Huskies one if you're a Huskies owner. And so as we move into the next steps, you're going to understand how to do that. But for this step, what we really want to do is delve down deep into your ideal target markets. And what you're looking for is a market that you can kind of almost think of one person and they represent an entire segment of people. So in the case of the pet owners, what we're going to do is say we're looking at, for example, maybe single men who own dogs. That might be a really nice target market, or teenagers that have reptiles, or a family that has multiple pets. When we start looking at those individual markets, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to create a campaign that's going to catch their attention because we're clear about who they are. An example I often use, a client of mine came to me at one point and he said, I'm having some real difficulties because he ran a wedding photography company in Turks and Caicos. And he said, I'm having some real difficulties because I've got this huge studio and multiple photographers and super high-end photography equipment. And you know what? There are people who come and visit the island here and they've got a camera and they notice people taking wedding pictures on the beach and they think, wow, I could start a company. And so what do? They start a competitive company. And when they start that competitive company, they put up a website and their website looks just as good as my friend's website. So how can he compete with that? Because their price is going to be a whole lot lower than his. And so I said, okay, step one, who's your overall target market? Well, anybody who is getting married in Turks and Caicos or might get married in Turks and Caicos. Okay, cool. Now, who's your ideal target market? Well, think about this. Who are the different people involved in the planning of and the executing of the wedding? Well, if we remember indirect, right? Remember indirect, then we might talk to wedding planners. There's one good ideal target market, because if we can go and win over a couple of wedding planners, they can bring us business, right? One might be local resorts, right? That's a referrer, that's an indirect market. We go to the local resort and maybe people. So you could definitely go after the indirect, but then you could also go after the direct. But inside the direct, well, let's think a little bit about that. Who are some of the direct people that might be involved in purchasing the wedding photography services? Well, it could be the father of the groom, the best man, the bride, the maid of honor, or any number of other people in the wedding party. So what we might want to do is start taking a look at the fact that there are different psychologies involved. The bride has a whole different set of values and concerns And so these start to become ideal target markets within the overall target market. So your assignment at this point is really straightforward. It's to take a look at the overall target market that you did in the first module and to subdivide it into a series of ideal target markets. Ideally, what you'd like to do for this exercise is come up with 5 to 10 direct prospects. What I mean is direct ideal target markets that you go after, and at least 2 or 3 indirect. That is to say, people who could refer business to you. So you want to come up with 5 to 10 direct ideal target markets that you can approach. And then you want to come up with 2 or 3 indirect. By the way, if your industry is very different and you predominantly want to go through indirect, well, maybe then you need to have 5 or 10 of those. As a kind of template here, I'm suggesting you come up with some direct and some indirect ideal target markets and write them down. Write them down. And it looks like technically we're back on here. So we're back on, guys. It's excellent. Sorry about the glitch there. Back to recording. So your assignment for this module is super straightforward. You want to end up with a list of direct ideal target markets and indirect target markets. Here's how you know if they're good lists. If as you look at it, as you look at one of your ideal target markets, can you imagine that target market having some very common concerns, some very common values, some very common problems or challenges that they're facing? Because if you've done that, if you've come into this very tight psychological niche, then you know you've got a great ideal target market. So that's your assignment, some direct ideal target markets and some indirect target markets. Go ahead and write them down. That's the end of module 2. What we're going to do in module 3 is we're now going to go into psychological evaluation so we can really identify who these target markets are so that we can create phenomenal campaigns that will definitely attract their attention. So get the assignment done for the end of this module, and I'll see you in the next module. All right.
Jan would love you to answer her question again. She missed it when the computer crashed. So.
All right. Do I have a screen for questions?
You have a screen. You're all back on.
It's not on.
Oh, that screen's not on. We don't have that set up yet. You can tell it when the computer crashed.
So it turns out that the computer luckily we had backup. So I gather you didn't lose audio. I'm hoping you didn't lose audio.
There was a moment of loss.
You may even have lost audio for a bit there. I'm really sorry. What happened is the primary broadcast computer just went down like that. So the recording is intact. That's not a problem. That said, Jan's question. Okay, if you
what
left
if
me
my
again.
market is wine drinkers? Isn't that already broad? How might I go wider?
Okay, so Jan's question is, what if my market is wine drinkers? Isn't that already very broad? How can I go broader? Well, my answer to that is a little bit humorous, and that is, well, Jan, I'm not sure I want you to go any wider because I don't want to sit here and figure out how to help you convince people to drink when they don't already drink. Now, kidding aside, I would like you to imagine for a minute that when you say wine drinkers, what do you mean by that? Because there are different types of wine drinkers, aren't there? There are wine drinkers that are, basic wine drinkers. They go out and get the cheapest glass of wine they can. There's another wine drinker that's kind of, medium. Oh, I think this is a nice wine. And then there are other people who can smell the wine from 4 feet away and smell the birch in the background and the underpinnings of coal or whatever it is that's in the flavors, right? You've got all these different types of wine drinkers. And then you have other people who drink alcohol but don't drink wine. And so I would suggest to you that your overall target market is probably anybody of age to drink alcohol who should be drinking. We obviously don't want to go after everybody because there are some people who clearly should not be drinking anymore and they've decided not to. No convincing them otherwise. But kidding aside, what I want to be really clear about is think about the power of what we're about to do here. Think about this. You maybe saw the movie Sideways. If you're into wine, I'm going to assume you saw the movie Sideways. Did you notice what happened after that movie? All kinds of people stepped up their interest in wine. That was an outstanding inceptive marketing campaign. That was extremely inceptive. You were going to see a movie. It was a story that you wanted to see. It was engaging. It was fun. And it made people subtly realize that they wanted to buy. You got me? So what I'm saying is your overall target market should basically be anybody who consumes alcohol. Anybody who legally consumes alcohol. And then from there, we're going to learn the steps that we can, because again, imagine you've got somebody who really doesn't drink wine very much, or they drink it occasionally, and suddenly you teach them, you train their palate, you teach them a little bit about how wine is made, and you get them interested in it. Then does that increase their wine consumption? Yeah, quite possibly. So your overall target market is probably anybody who is legally consuming alcohol. That's my guess. Next one. I really need this. They all need for this to go a lot quicker with the questions. So maybe that's the best thing. Hand it to me and I'll do it. Sorry guys, they've restored everything except for my display screen, so I can't actually see the questions. So we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way. Isn't it amazing that the old-fashioned way is a tablet? All right, I don't know what I'm.
It's a touch screen, so you can just flip through with your finger.
So Avo Cask says, wouldn't it be easier to narrow your target market down to a smaller size because I'm just starting a business and the message or story should be composed to a larger audience than 97% from the beginning? You're really going to get, that's a great question, and you're really going to understand. So he's basically having the exact reaction that a lot of people have when we start off with this overall target market and we start narrowing down into the ideal target market. It's really key that we get comfortable with the idea of starting off with this broad, expansive idea of everybody that we can sell to, and then narrowing down to a much tighter market. It's very, very imperative that we do that, because once you get comfortable with that, you begin to realize that instead of feeling constricted by being niched, what you realize is you have a real world of opportunity in front of you. It's extremely effective. Take, for example, the bride, groom, wedding photography thing. We can try and do a broad spectrum advertisement that appeals to everybody in the wedding party. But when we realize that we target each one individually and we get much higher conversion, it just creates a huge world of possibility. All right, next one. Oh, I saw that when it came up. Yeah, go ahead. Sue, as a speaker, are you still saying to be able to speak on any subject and not narrow yourself down to a couple of niches? So Sue, this applies to speaking extremely effectively. It really applies to speaking extremely effectively. Because remember that as a speaker, you have a whole lot of different strategic objectives when you go onto a stage. You have many of them, right? And I want to be clear that at the very core, a speaker is only ever effective if they're engaging, right? It doesn't matter how good their information is if they're not engaging. And that's one of the core principles of inception marketing, is that your content needs to be engaging. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that once you realize what your overall target market is, it gives you a sense of the type of stories that you want to tell. It gives a sense of the type of talk you want to design. It gives a sense of what the headline of your talk might need to be in a given situation, and even where you might want to speak. But when you start narrowing down into your ideal target markets, you can now get much more clear about the strategic objectives of any story inside your presentation, or even the overall presentation that you're designing. The rest of this program is going to be extremely valuable to you if you're doing any professional speaking at all. All right. Next question, Helena Kastikainen. Helena Kastikainen. I hope I'm pronouncing that even close to correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Helena's question is, what if I can come up with hundreds of ideal target markets? How can I prioritize? That is absolutely a great question. We're going to deal with that now in the next module to some degree. It's going to come up in the next module, but I'll give you a little snippet of it right now. You really start with where you think you're going to get the best return on investment. So I'm going to discuss it in the next video, but I'd like you to imagine, Helena, that you're the wedding photographer. Who do you think would be your first ideal target market that you'd go after, right? Imagine there's the father of the bride, the groom, the best man, the maid of honor. Maybe those are some of the ones. Oh, remember also there's wedding planners and the local resorts and that sort of stuff. So who would you go after first? Well, I might be tempted to go after wedding planners first, right? Because one wedding planner could land me lots and lots of weddings. So that might be the one that would excite me most. But in the direct area, where I'm actually going after one of the consumers directly, well, as you'll find in the next video, my client was really clear about which one was most exciting to him because it drove most of the buying decisions. And it was not the father or bride, it was not the groom, it was not the best man, it was the bride. And that was the one that was most exciting, was going to provide the most immediate return on investment, and then prioritize to the next one, and then prioritize to the next one. I hope that helps. Tiffany, I'm struggling to identify the ideal target market. I have a permaculture course. Regenerative gardening is how I refer to it, geared up to help people learn how to grow food. Okay, so Tiffany, your overall target market at this point, I mean, it's pretty broad. And it depends on what kind of gardening you're doing, because if you even are working with indoor permacultures, then your target market is basically anybody who lives somewhere. If you're dealing with outdoor gardening, then it's basically anybody who's got outdoor gardening space, I suppose. But when it gets down to ideal target markets, there's some simple ways you can do this. For example, geography. right? The type, if you're marketing to people in Calgary versus people that are in Miami versus people that are in Helsinki versus people that are in Johannesburg, there's going to be different drivers involved in those different geographic locations. So that's kind of at a high level. And then at a lower level, you could be delving down into the different reasons that people might be interested in developing permaculture. Some people might want to do it because they perceive growing their own food will be healthier for them. Some people are doing it because they feel like growing their own food is going to be less expensive. It's going to save them money. Other people are doing it because it's an environmental issue. They want to make sure that they're, right now, how many liters of oil are being used to transport food around the world? And so they may be taking a look and saying, hey, you know what? Instead, what we want to do is grow our food and cut down on the environmental impact. So when you start thinking about why people are buying, it might help you to figure out what some of your more narrow ideal target markets are. What I would suggest also is that you also could be looking at things like family structure. There are families that would be interested in permaculture. There are single people that would be interested in home gardening and that kind of stuff. So the idea here is that just to try to narrow down to a point where you've got a common ground, right? And remember, that common ground doesn't have to be about your product or service at all. It's just that they have a common ground, that there's a common set of understandings that they all have. For example, if you are talking about, let's say in one campaign you decide to go after families that live in, let's say, families with 2 or more children, something like that, or families with children for that matter. So you're now talking about a family versus a single woman between 35 and 45 living in a condo, right? Well, you can imagine that the marketing that you're going to need to develop for those 2 different target audiences is going to be very different. But by narrowing it down, it's going to be a lot more effective. And that's what will come out of this next step. So I hope that begins to answer your question, and the next step definitely will. Okay, Patricia Barrow says, my target market is moms of teens. What would be a broader market? All moms, moms and dads? Well, Patricia, I might need to know a little bit more about what it is that you're selling or why you're trying to reach moms of teens. But remember that your overall target, if ultimately the service that you're providing, which is probably some sort of coaching or education for moms with teens, I'm only guessing, then your overall target market really is moms with teens. You might expand it out a little bit because your overall target market might be moms with teens and preteens because, they're on the way. But then equally, you might want to remember that when you go into the ideal target market phase, is that the question is now, how do you reach the moms with teens, right? So who are some of the influencers that might help you to reach moms with teens? Well, in that case, dads, right? Or teens or schools. Are you with me? So your overall target market in this case might be moms with teens, but when you start delving into the ideal target market, first we look at indirect. So indirect might be the people who can refer you to the mom or refer the mom to you. So for example, is it possible to create an entire campaign that's aimed at dads that gets mom interested in this thing? Yeah, absolutely. Or schools or community centers or whatever. And then equally, you might go after teens. You might go after those individual market segments that then gets the mom ignited and gets her interested. Or you could go after moms. But now that you're going after a direct, now you got to subdivide moms, right? Because there are all kinds of, there are moms they're affluent, like there are moms that are not so affluent. There are single moms, there are married moms, there are step moms, right? You see, we could break down the target market, the direct market into a bunch of different target markets. We could talk about this topic all day long. I'm just going to give you one really concrete example. Just imagine for a minute the difference when you start to realize that your marketing should be niched, when you realize that your marketing should be aiming at a very specific psychology. Think for a moment about the difference between the marketing you might want to do between a stepmom and a mom, right? Entirely different set of problems. For example, with stepmoms, one of the challenges they often have is they're like, I don't know when and where the line of discipline lies. When am I allowed to discipline this child? When am I allowed to play a parenting role? When can I not? I don't want to replace their mom, right? It's a whole different psychology than the maternal mother has. So when you're creating your overall target market, I think you've already got it. I might say moms of teens and preteens. And then your ideal target markets, you have the indirect, which is all the people that could refer you to moms. And then the direct is all the different types of moms there are. I hope that helps. I'll take one more question on this section, and then we'll start recording the next. And in fact, you know what? Who was that last question from?
Lost it now.
Okay, don't worry. We'll come back to that. Give me another question. I'll take this one last question here. And this question is from,
Let's go. Where'd it go?
by the way, while they're getting me my next question, I want you to know that in the Facebook group for this whole live broadcast we're doing, there's going to be a thread in there called questions from day one. If I don't get to your questions during the live session, then don't worry, because some of you aren't even watching live and I can't possibly get to all the questions that we're getting. So if we don't get to your question during the live session, please post your questions in the Facebook group. I'm not promising to get to all of them, but I'll do the best I can to get to as many of them as possible. So please post your questions in there if I don't get to you during the live session. Is this my next one here?
Yeah.
Achille? I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm very sorry. Achille Ramabaisen. Okay, I'm really sorry for not pronouncing that properly. For overall target market and the ideal target market, how much importance does how much importance of industry specialization needs to be taken into account? Let me answer that a different way, because I'm not sure, it's not as clear to me what you're asking, and I think I know what you're asking. What's really important to remember is that when you're figuring out the overall target market and when you're figuring out the ideal target markets, you need to do it irrespective of what you're selling. Don't think about what you're selling. So for example, when we're taking a look at who they are, I mean, let me put this to you a little differently. Obviously, you need to know what it is you're selling, but when you're subdividing the targets, you don't want to subdivide them relative to your product. You want to subdivide the targets relative to the psychological position of those people. In other words, you're not trying to think about through the lens of your product. You're trying to get, so your specialization within your industry is not nearly as important as the specialization of what concerns them in a given day. That's really what you're after, is trying to get the tightest possible psychological evaluation. Does that make sense? All right, cool. I'm going to move in now to module 3, which is all about the psychological evaluation of the market. And by the way, if I didn't get to your questions about overall or target market, when we're finished with module 3, I'm going to take questions on everything we've done so far, including this section of psychological evaluation. Are we good? Excellent. Team, are we good? Okay, can you guys do me a little bit of a favor? When you're curating the questions, curate the questions so that if they're, just make sure the grammar is clear so it's really easy for me to process them and read them a little. So just if you need to edit them a little. What's that?
Just coming in so fast.
Well, just pick one and do it. I can't read all of them anyway. So just when you do pick one, make it as easy for me to process as possible. All right, are you guys ready? Let's move over back to Studio Zone. We're into module 3, which is, yes, module 3. Okay. Okay. All right. Welcome back to Inception Marketing Video Training. We're now into Module 3. Module 3 is where we're going to start looking at the psychological differences of our various ideal target markets. This is an incredibly important step. This is where we really begin to realize that marketing is not about your product or service in the way it used to be. Marketing is now about the prospect. I'm going to back up for a minute and I'm going to make a little statement here, and that is that I think there is a very clear relationship between marketing, networking, and dating. The principles are all very similar, and what we get wrong with one, we get wrong with the others. And what I often like to do is use sort of parallel examples that make something very visceral and real. So what I often do at my live events is I'll often pick a woman in the front row and I'll ask her if she's willing to go on a little date with me, a little example date, so that I can show this principle to the audience very well. And so what I do is I go to her and she has a microphone and I say to her, okay, well, I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to put this date together, and I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself, and I'm using an example. So I say, I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a partner in a law firm, and we do intellectual property law, copyrights, and trademarks. Like, we've got this one case that we're in court with right now. It's all about how this one company. Well, at that point, she's glazed over and everybody in the audience can see it. What principle have we broken here? We're marketing the product or service. In dating, it's you, right? If you're sitting there talking all about you, then you're not going to have a very good date. Are you with me? And so then what I do is I have a second date with her. I ask her for a second chance, and I have a different date. And that date works like this. Same introduction. I'm really glad we have an opportunity to have this date together. And I would love to share a little bit with you about my, my business and my law practice. But first of all, tell me a little bit about you. What do you love to do for fun? And as soon as I do that, her eyes light up and she starts answering me and she's telling me her favorite hobbies. Maybe she tells me about her business if she's got one, or her job or her family or whatever's going on. And at that point, she really begins to light up. And what's really fascinating is roughly 80 to 90% of the time that I do this in front of a live audience, she will end up mentioning something like she has a book she wants to write, or there's some software she's developing for her business, or there's some technology that they've created. Upwards of 90% of the time I play this game, at some point in our conversation with me just listening to her, something will come up that, guess what, I'm then able to hook my intellectual property law firm to. Are you following me? I want to be really clear about this. I'm using it in a live audience as an example of how to do a good date versus a bad date. But what happens is almost every single time the prospect, or the date in this case, ends up giving me some information that allows me to refine my pitch. Now, I'm using dating because it's so visceral and it's so easy for us to understand, but the principles are exactly the same in networking. Look, do you have an elevator pitch? If you do, delete it. You don't need an elevator pitch. What you need is ears. You need to listen, right? So when you go to a networking event, here's what very often happens at networking events. People sit there and go, okay, what's my elevator pitch? How am I going to introduce myself? What am I going to say? How am I going to introduce, what product, what service? And often people have 2 or 3 different ways that they could introduce themselves. And they're a little bit, confused as to how to do it properly. And so what I want to suggest is the simplest way to end that confusion, the simplest way to not have to worry about how you introduce yourself, is to simply listen first. It's really simple. And so you're in a networking environment and you walk up and you meet someone and you go, hey, what do you do? What's your business about? What are you looking for? How can I help you? You ask questions. They give you answers. Once you've learned a little bit about them, you're then able to pick which of your elevator pitches are going to be most applicable to the environment or to the situation that they've just given you. Does this make sense? I sure hope it does. And I'm sure many of you are already doing this. But the unconscious thing that most people are doing is walking up and introducing themselves and wanting to talk about themselves or their products or their services first. Look, no matter what you want to do from an influence perspective, no matter what product you sell, no matter what service you offer, it's really tempting to talk about all the features and benefits of it and to be, because remember before we talked about if you really believe in your product or service, if you really believe in it, then it's easier to sell. Well, if you really believe in it, you want to talk about it. What I want to suggest to you is that no matter what you're trying to sell, there are many different ways to sell it. And you won't know which one to use unless you've really listened to the prospect. Does this make sense? So if that works in a dating environment and that works in a networking environment, then I'm going to put to you that it also works in a marketing environment. And what that means is that we need to dive deeply into what matters to the prospects, what matters to them, and not what matters to them through the lens of our product. When I'm in front of a live audience, I'll often ask people, when we've used the example like I talked about in the previous module about the wedding photography, right? What happens at that point is that, just cut recording for a minute. Hold on one second. I got to refer to something in notes. Hold on one second. Okay, cool. Back to recording. Thanks, guys. Just a little, I want to make sure I get my syntax correct here. So when we're looking at this psychological evaluation of our ideal target markets, what we want to do is make absolutely sure that we're not doing it through the lens of our product or service. All right. So in order to do this, pick any one of the ideal target markets that you created. If you pick any one of them and just think a little bit about what's going on in their life. Now, the example I often use with a live audience is really simple. what happens is the example I used from the last module where we talked about wedding photography. Well, we figure out all the different potential direct target markets. The father of the bride, the best man, the maid of honor, the bride, the groom, and so on and so forth. So then we have to figure out which of those ideal target markets we're going to go after. But even before we choose which one we're going to go after, what we might want to start doing is looking at the psychological differences between them. So for example, does the father of the bride have the same concerns as the bride? No. Does the groom have the same concerns as the bride? No. Does the maid of honor have the same concerns as the best man? No. They all have different concerns about the whole wedding process. Now, what's really interesting is I'll often ask people, what do you think the bride is most concerned with on her wedding day? And very often the answers I get are the flowers, the dress, right? They start immediately going after visual things. Why? Because they're thinking like a photographer. They're thinking about the pictures. We want to step away from your product or service, and we want to go into their life, whatever their life is, what is concerning them, not about your product or service. This is about trying to figure out what's really going on for them. And so in the case of the wedding, let's take a look. If we take a look at the father of the bride, what are some of the primary concerns of the father of the bride? Well, his daughter's happiness. I mean, like I can tell you as the father of a daughter, happiness is a big deal. We want her to have the best possible day. We want her to be really happy. Also, as the father of the bride, is it possible that the father of the bride might be a little concerned about the budget, right? In many cultures, the father of the bride is paying for or paying the lion's share of the whole process, right? So the father of the bride might be concerned with the budget. Yeah, those are some things the father of the bride might be concerned with. What does the groom, what is the groom concerned about around the wedding day? What's the most important aspect of the wedding day for the groom? Well, there could be a number of different things, but I'll tell you that the most important, when I've talked to people about this, it seems like the most important aspect of the wedding for the groom is that his bride has the best possible day. He wants her to be smiling and laughing the entire time. He wants it to be her best day. That's really interesting. Okay, so what if we go to the best man? Well, the best man has a number of different things going on there. He wants to make sure that the groom is marrying the right one. He wants to make sure that the rings are where they're supposed to be. And he wants to make sure that everything runs smoothly. He wants to make sure that he entertains people, that he plays a good host. So there's a number of different things that the best man might be interested in. What's the bride interested in? Well, this is really fascinating because when we start to look at the groom and the bride, we can really recognize that there's a difference. There is a definite difference between the way the groom and the bride view the wedding day. The groom views the wedding day from the perspective of, I want my bride to be so happy. I want her to have the best possible day. The bride has been looking at this marriage situation very differently than the groom for a very long time. Now, I'm going to speak in stereotypes here a little bit, and please forgive that. I recognize this is not true for everybody, but I'm not going to have this whole training program run by the edges of the bell curve. We're going to talk about statistical realities because marketing works on statistical realities. And here's the thing. When I ask live audiences all around the world, I ask a very fundamental question. Women, how old were you when you first considered or first conceived of getting married? When you first play acted it, when you first visualized it, when you first thought of meeting Prince Charming, how old were you? And the answers that I get all around the world range between about 4 and 18. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 are very, very common answers that I get from women. I know there are many women who don't think about it that early, but there are many that do. There are many reasons for this. I would say that Disney is one of them, Snow White and all that sort of stuff. Whatever the reason, women tend to be thinking about this stuff way earlier because when I ask that same question to the groom, or not to the groom, but to men, I go, men, how old were you the first time you thought about getting married? Well, they just laugh very often. And I think sometimes the women laugh even louder because they realize the men weren't really thinking about it there. I often joke that there's men in the audience wearing a wedding ring and they hadn't even thought about it properly yet at all. It's just a different psychology. And when we're doing marketing, we have to take those psychological realities in mind. We have to dive deep into those psychologies so that we can really figure out how we can engage them, how we can speak with them. And so when we go into this step of psychological evaluation, you want to pick a handful of your ideal target markets and start delving down into who they are and what they really think about, what they're really concerned about, what's going on in their life, what are they most excited about, what are their goals, what are the biggest challenges they're facing. If you're in the corporate world, for example, one of my companies was selling mobile data solutions and barcode scanning systems, wireless networking, and service for all of those things. So we had a number of different ideal target markets that we could go after in a business or in a business to business environment. We could be selling to the IT director or the whatever the manager is of the IT systems for the company. We could be selling to the buyer. We could also be selling to the finance director, or we could even be going directly after the CEO, depending on what our marketing was. Remember, the same ad is not going to appeal to all those different people with their different concerns. In our case, we realized that our most exciting ideal target market was the IT director. It seemed like most of the buying decisions were made at that level, and the shortest sales cycle was made at that level. So that's where we went first, and we started marketing directly to them. But we determined something, and what we determined is that when we were trying to sell to them, well, everyone was trying to sell to them. And so it was tough to break through the fog, the marketing fog. So we started thinking a lot about what was going on for them, right, day by day. And we identified a lot of interesting things. We identified, for example, that at that stage, they were having a hard time, many of them were having a hard time justifying the purchase of laptops for all of their teams. Everybody was on desktops. And back then, laptops were really, really expensive. So we noticed that a lot of IT managers were really worried about that. We'd surveyed and we found out that a lot of them were having a hard time getting budgets for laptops. They couldn't seem to convince the stuffed shirts in the boardroom that laptops would increase efficiency and so on, so they couldn't get there. That was interesting to us. We also identified that very often they were having a hard time identifying or buying equipment once it had been obsoleted, like when a manufacturer was no longer manufacturing it anymore and they couldn't get it. We also found that very often they ended up with equipment that they needed to dispose of. And as there was a bigger push toward environmental consciousness and awareness, they didn't know what to do with this equipment because a lot of it was extremely specialized and niche. So they didn't know what to do with that equipment. They didn't want to just dump it in a landfill, but there was nowhere to sell it because it was so niche. Can you imagine that each of those things is very interesting to know that they're worried about, that they're thinking about, irrespective of what we're selling, right? But each of those bits of information about them allows us to figure out how we might want to communicate with them. When we got to a place where we really felt like we'd saturated that ideal target market, we decided to move on to another ideal target market, and we went after the finance directors. Because we got to some companies where no matter what marketing we did, we could not get to the IT manager. So we decided to go after a referrer, right? We decided to go after an influencer. So what did we do? We went after the finance directors of those companies. But we're not going to be able to use the same marketing on the finance director, are we? We're going to have to go after a more strategic, specific to them marketing, right? So what's the finance director concerned about? Well, let's be really clear. The finance director is mostly concerned with one thing, and that is the bottom line, profits, right? And so if we were able to go to the finance directors and demonstrate for them that some of the old obsolete equipment that they were just throwing away in a landfill, which is bad for the environment, maybe not such a big concern to the finance director, but what was a concern to the finance director is, guess what? That equipment had value as long as they could be paired up with the right buyer. It was so niche and specialized, and this was before the days of just being able to advertise on eBay, right? So this equipment was just going to end up in a landfill, and all of a sudden we were able to demonstrate to them they could turn that equipment into cash. Do you think we could get their attention? Yes. So when you've got your list of ideal target markets that you want to go after, what you want to do is start digging into who they are. What are their goals? What are they interested in, right? What are they concerned about? And when you begin to recognize all of those things, you find yourself in a much better situation, a much better position to market to them. Think of it simply like networking. I know it might not be. You might be advertising via social media, or you might be advertising through direct mail, or on television or radio, or any number of different ways. But still, always in your head, think of it in terms of how would you best engage somebody in a networking environment. You would not walk up to the finance director at a networking event and go, hey, I'd like to talk to you about the latest equipment that we've got available. No, you would talk to the finance director about how to increase profits, how to reduce costs, how to increase the bottom line through efficiencies, or how to reclaim value from equipment that they'd already written off. Then you're going to get their attention, right? So for this step, what I want you to think about is pick a few of your ideal target markets, maybe a few from each side, a few of the direct ones and a few of the influencer ones, and just start giving some serious thought to who they are, what they think about, what they're concerned about. This is a very, very important step. If you can really handle this step properly, you put yourself in an incredibly powerful situation to be able to engage them through any medium, So let's back up again. You're looking at ideal target markets from the perspective of narrow psychological niches. So you already have your initial list of that. Pick the 2 or 3 that you think might be the best return on investment from each side of the table. And then just with one sheet of paper, dedicate a little bit of time to thinking about what is important to those people. This is going to fit very nicely with the next module where we start talking about market research. Because you see, if you do market research without knowing what's in your prospect's mind, then the market research is half as effective. So this step about really getting some, let's call it corporate empathy, if you like, getting some empathy for your clients. If you can do this, then you're going to be in a position, first of all, to be able to engage them a lot better. And secondly, be able to conduct much better and more targeted market research that's going to help you turn up information that's going to be infinitely more valuable for them. I hope that that is very helpful to you, and I really want you to apply it. So your homework assignment for this module is very simple. Pick 2 or 3 ideal target markets from the direct side, pick 2 or 3 ideal target markets from the indirect side, and just dedicate a piece of paper to each one of them on a psychological evaluation of what's important to them. Now, let's talk about how you're going to determine that, right? Because you can't get inside their head. You can imagine maybe what it's like for them. You can imagine what it's like to be a bride preparing for a wedding. In fact, some of you can probably imagine that very well because you've been there. And some of you have never been there, so you can only imagine it. And so what I also want you to think about is how might you get this information? Is it possible that you could go out and identify people in the market that represent that niche and sit down and have lunch with them and pick their brains a little bit about what's going on for them? What are they thinking about? What are they worried about? So initially, you can probably just make some guesses as to what their drivers are, what their values are, what their concerns are, what their goals are. But then if you really want to go the extra mile with this, get a phone call together, do a survey, go out to your prospects and ask this information. And remember, you're asking this information not through the lens of your product, but through the very simple lens of their daily existence. What is on their mind every day? What kind of questions are they asking Google? What kind of challenges are they facing on a day-to-day basis? When you've got that, you've got the hook that you need to create engagement, and you've also got the information you need to conduct really effective market research. So you've got your assignment for this module, and I'll see you in the next module where we are going to talk about market research, and you're going to see how important this module is to that, and you're going to understand that when we do really effective market research and we identify particular types of information that can really engage our prospects, we're going to create a much higher level of engagement for people come and want to do business with us naturally and effortlessly. So I'll see you in the next module. All right. I realize now that because we've powered through a couple of modules directly, we haven't given anybody an opportunity for a break, including me. So I'm going to get to your questions in a minute. Keep them coming in. I've got a question coming up here from Helen and Amy Turner and a couple of others that I see scrolling along. So I'll get to your questions in a minute. But what we're going to first do is we're going to take about a 3-minute break. It's just a little bio break. Get yourself a glass of water, go use the washroom, whatever the case may be. It's going to be a very quick little break, and then we're going to resume in about 3 minutes. Those cameras are cool for the minute. We're only live. It would be good to have them on, but it's not quite as, yeah. So imagine for a minute when I've been in front of, where were we here, on customization of markets, when you're going after a broad audience, right? When you're trying to go after a broad audience, that's the monkey nuts we were talking about. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's the lazy marketer, right? The lazy marketing is to try to create one campaign that's going to appeal to everybody. So if I go to a live audience and I say, hey, everybody try to help me design an ad for wedding photography. Well, here's what happens. I ask people, tell me what are all the features of a wedding photography ad there should be. Well, there should be a bride and a groom. The bride should be in a wedding dress. The groom should be in a suit. She should be holding flowers. The flowers should have that baby's breath flowers on it, or the angel's breath, whatever they call it. The setting should be a forest or a church or maybe a beach, right? And how should they be standing? Well, the bride should be standing gazing up at the groom, and the groom should either be looking down at her or casting his eyes off in the distance. And by the way, where are the bride's feet for this, right? Where are the bride's feet? 1 foot up. We know all this. We know that that's what the ad has to look like. Well, what we should recognize from that is that that means that everybody already knows that it's an ad. If your ads, if your websites, if your business card, if your brochures, if your social media posts look like your competitors, then what you've designed is camouflage, right? You're not standing out, you're fitting in. And so what we want to do is stand out rather than fitting in. And so when we do this overall target market, that's everybody we want to sell to. But when we then delve down into this ideal target market, what we're going to recognize is that one generic ad that simply says world-class wedding photography is not going to work. The only people that will be attracted to that ad are the people that were already thinking about wedding photography, the interested people, which means they're calling all the other photographers and they're getting price comparisons, which was exactly the challenge that my friend was facing, is that he couldn't compete with these people on price because they were a bunch of like one camera person pretending to be a photographer. The trouble is, normally I tell my customers when they're concerned about competing on price, don't worry about it. Don't give into it. Don't lower your price. If you're really high quality, if you provide the best service, people will come back to you, and then you haven't had a price erosion problem. The minute you lower your price to win business, you've started eroding your value in the marketplace. The trouble is that advice does not work for wedding photography. You know, like if you've lost the sale, you've lost the sale permanently. They're never coming back. Wedding photography is not a repeat business. I'm sorry to say. I know it seems like it could be because, you know, these days people get married 2 and 3 times. But let me be very clear, men, you need to understand something. If you're ever getting ready for your second wedding and you go to your new bride and you say to her, hey, I know this really great wedding photographer. He did my last wedding. If you do that, you might not have your next wedding. No, wedding photography is a one-time thing. And so we have to get preemptive. We can't wait. We have to get preemptive. And so what do? We target preemptively. We don't just advertise generically and hope to win on price. We target preemptively. And so that's why we look at the bride and the groom and the father of the bride as individual markets, so we can go after them long before they've even thought about buying the wedding photographer or contracting the wedding photographer. So I hope that begins to answer the question for you. I hope that's, and again, as we go into the market research section and as we go into the engagement section, you're really going to, you're going to like this a lot. You're already on track. Absolutely. All right. Next question. Georgia Vanderbilt. We manufacture amazing candles. Our current target is people who like candles. So that is so narrow. Can you give us a broader audience? Oh, Georgia, let's talk. So can you put that up? Yeah. So let's talk about that. So when you are, you manufacture amazing candles. Now, first of all, take a look, guys. In marketing, what do we want to do? Immediately, we want to talk about what we sell, right? She doesn't just sell candles, she makes amazing candles. It's the natural instinct to want to sell, features and benefits. All right. Then she says, our current target market is people who like candles. Well, wait a minute now. What are the steps? Let's go back to the overall target market, right? The overall target market is basically anybody, right? I mean, anybody over a certain age, I think. I think that there should be maybe an age limit on where candles are involved. But basically, let's say anybody over 16 years old, right? There's your market, anybody over 16. That's your overall target market. Now, when we go into ideal target markets, right? Well, that's very different. For example, restaurants. Are restaurants not potentially an ideal target market? Sure. Individual people like single women. Are single women an ideal target market? Sure. Are single men? Yeah. Are couples an ideal target market? Sure they are. So what you're doing is at this point delving into these ideal target markets irrespective of their current interest in candles. Completely irrespective of their current interest in candles. So for example, let's say I was going to go after an ideal target market of, let's say, married couples that have been married for more than 10 years. That's maybe one of my ideal target markets. We could get more narrow, but for the sake of this example, we're going to say married couples that have been married for more than 10 years. All right. And then, you know, since we can't really market to the couple, we should probably choose whether we're marketing to the male or the female in that situation because they have different concerns after 10 years, right? So if we were going to market to the men, what are some of the concerns that the man has after being married for 10 years? And then what are some of the concerns that the woman has after being married for 10 years? They're different concerns, right? And again, guys, I'm going to talk in big stereotypical language. So I'm not saying these are rules. They're just observations and just for illustrative purposes only. But let's be clear that it's very possible that after 10 years of marriage that that the wife is worried about fidelity, is worried about the fidelity of her marriage, and is he, is after 10 years, is he bored? Is he looking at younger women? I mean, these are things that are happening at that time frame in her mind potentially. And then what kinds of things might he be worried about after 10 years? He might be worrying the same thing. He might be worrying, am I still exciting to her? He might be worrying about, is he getting enough intimacy in his marriage? She might be worrying the same thing. So there are some differences and there's some crossover similarities. So you might right now, Georgina, be wondering, why am I talking about all this? Because you manufacture amazing candles. Because we are going to play chess. We're not going to play darts anymore. If you could set up a stand out on the sidewalk on the street and say, we sell amazing candles. And you could have a retail shop that says, we sell amazing candles. Fine. Yes, monkey nuts. You'd get a certain number of people and you'd make it work. But what if now you were to create something different? And we're going to go into this as we go through the program, but I'm going to give you a full example here. What if right now we created a campaign for, let's say for men that are in marriages that have been married for over 10 years, all right? We create a campaign aimed at those men. And the campaign is, hey men, would you like to stimulate more intimacy in your relationship? We have 8 powerful steps that you can use right now, and you'll notice the results in a week, right? So wait a minute now. Why are we still not talking about candles? Because they're not thinking about candles. So we don't want to talk about candles. We want to talk about what they're thinking about. And what he's thinking about is, how can I improve the intimacy in my marriage? How can I improve it? Okay, you're going to potentially educate him on how to improve it. Well, let's go through that. How could he improve the intimacy in his marriage? Well, I mean, one of the things that I think most men could really learn from here is listen more. Would you agree? They could listen more. If they listened more and they allowed their wives to speak and to share their feelings and their problems without trying to fix everything all the time and without trying to shortcut it and explain how they're wrong, if they just listen more and they're more engaged, I think they could improve their intimacy. Again, Georgina, you're wondering, why am I not talking about candles? Because I'm talking to them about what they're interested in. And if I start giving them some valuable information about how to increase their intimacy, I'm going to build my credibility and authority. And as a consequence of that, I am going to be able to help guide purchasing decisions of theirs in the future. Then I might suggest to them, oh, you know what? Another way to improve intimacy in your relationship is to have like a regular, once a month or once a week date night where you plan an evening for her. Just take care of her. Take her to her favorite place for dinner. Cook a meal for her. And by the way, let me tell you guys, men, listen to me carefully. On that day, take a little extra time to get dressed nicely. That's not the day that you just kind of slap some clothes on. And date night is special. Are your shoes shined? She notices these things. And I'm telling you, if you put a little bit of that effort in, you're going to notice even immediately the first time you do it, that there's going to be an increased sparkle in her eye. And she's going to be a whole lot more affectionate, and it's going to move toward increased intimacy. Now, Georgina, I hope you're following what's going on here, because at this point, the men are starting to go, okay, that's a good idea. Yep, I'm willing to try that. Okay, that's a good idea. And then I'm going to say, and by the way, if you really want to do it, sure, a couple times take her out for dinner. But one time, make dinner at home. And let me give you the ultimate recipe for the best dinner at home. First thing is, you cook what she loves. You do the research. You remember if you have to, or even if it's really special, think of a really special meal that you guys had maybe at an event or at a really great restaurant when you're on vacation one time or something. Think about a meal that you just had real powerful nostalgia, okay? Then go on to the internet and find a recipe for that dessert, that meal, and make that meal for her. Don't make sure she's not in the house. You make the meal. You make sure she knows what time to come home. And when she walks into the house, there's flowers. You're dressed nicely. There's smells of food in the air. And she sits down at the table, and she is served a meal that brings up all kinds of love and memories and so on. And on the table are the most gorgeous decorations, flowers, and candles. Incidentally, if you're going to get candles, I know where you should get them from. Now, I'm kidding around a little bit here with Georgina, but I hope that gives you an illustration of how we're going to get really strategic here. We're going to get strategic by recognizing that we identify our overall target market, everybody we would like to reach. Then we divide down into these ideal target markets, and then we talk to those people where they live about what they're interested in. And as a result of doing that, we build our own credibility and our own authority so that we can begin to make suggestions or advice to them. Incidentally, Even if I never discussed candles with them, if I just gave this guy 3 or 4 powerful things he could do to boost the intimacy in his relationship, if these things work, do you think that I'm going to have credibility with him? Do you think I'm going to have some authority? What could I now sell him? Anything, including candles. All right, Georgina, I hope that answers your question. And we'll go through these steps in detail as we go through the balance of the modules. Next question is coming in from Carol Benson. Carol says, so my market is conscious business instead of targeting specific business sizes and types. Anyone who's doing business today is a potential client. All right, let me try and break that down. So what you're saying is that instead of targeting, niching into specific types of businesses, your overall target market is anybody who's doing business. I think that's a great overall target market. Do I have any other tips on reaching a wide net and creating engagement, surveys, checklists, and video content? Okay, so Carol, let's just back up for a minute. Yes, your market should be anybody in business, right? If that's what your overall target market should be, it should be anybody that's in business, not people that are in business interested in your product or service, anybody. Then you're going to go down into the ideal target markets, because let's be really clear that the solopreneur has very different concerns than the person with 3 employees, who in turn has different concerns than the person who has 10 or 12, 30, 40, 80, 100, 1,000, 10,000, right? All of those people are in business, but they have different concerns. Also, one person is in business in manufacturing, and another person is selling information products, and another person is in a service-based business. So you have to recognize that, yes, you can have an overall target market of anyone in business, but if you're going to want to engage them, if you're going to want to excite them, if you're going to want to get them in with you, then what you're going to want to do is break those things down so that you can speak to them where they live. If you try to create one marketing campaign that appeals to every single person that's in business, so what that means is you're going to have to find things that every single person who's in business have in common. That's not going to be the easiest exercise in the world. What's going to be a lot easier is to identify those ideal target markets inside, and then you can have segments that have huge levels of commonality so that your marketing message can reach them directly. So yeah, now we can get to the tactical stuff you're asking. How can you create engagement? Well, we're going to do an entire section on that called engagement pitches. This is where we're going to learn exactly how to create engagement. And you're absolutely right. Surveys, checklists, video content, reverse opt-in. There's some fabulous ways to create engagement. And when we go into that module, you'll really get it. So we will cover that in depth when we get to the module on engagement pitches. Thank you very much, Carol. Great question. Trilin Reiser? Trilin? I don't know. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. I have all these international names from around the world, so I'm hoping I'm not, doing too harsh a job on them. All right, so is a limited target market such a bad thing? If I'm interested in selling medical supplies, I can't sell them to people who are not sick. So should I just focus on people who are sick? See, now here's what's going on, is that when we talk about the overall target market, we're really getting a lot more strategic. When you're talking about selling medical supplies, and again, I don't know which medical supplies, because when I think of medical supplies, I think of selling medical supplies to hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices, and so on. I think that you're talking about selling stuff to direct consumers based on your question. So here's a very simple thing. Your overall target market is probably anybody who might ever get sick, right? Which basically means anybody. Your overall target market is anybody. And it's important to recognize that that's the wide overall target market you have. Maybe your overall target market is specific to a given geographic area, I don't know. But if it is, even then, like let's say you're in, I don't know, Finland, then you would say my overall target market is anybody in Finland who might get sick one day, which means therefore anybody. But you're right, now we do want to go after a limited target market. And yeah, there is a time when you would want to sell specific medical supplies to somebody who's dealing with illness, who's kind of got illness now. But wait a second now. Isn't it quite possible that there are people out there that might want to have some of your medical supplies in the house already before they get sick? Doesn't that make sense? And so in that case, you might want to sell to all people rather than just people who are already dealing with a given level of symptomology. And so now that means, all right, who's your ideal target market? Well, you can divide up based on all kinds of different demographics, location, socioeconomic position, male, female, familial structure, whatever the case might be. But here's the thing. Once you've identified which market you're going after, right, then you can figure out what's important to them. And from that, you can create the right advice for them. I don't know what kind of medical supplies you sell, but for example, let's say you sell thermometers, right? Well, think of it, remember, a thermometer is a diagnostic tool. It's not something that somebody might need once they're sick. It's something they might need to determine how sick they are. You know, they might not even be sick, but they're like, I think I might have a bit of a fever. I need a thermometer to check that out. Also, by the time somebody has a fever bad enough to need a thermometer, do you really want to have to go out and buy one then, or do you want to have one in the house? Same with medication, right? So I would suggest to you that your overall target market is anyone who might get sick one day, which means basically anyone. And unless, of course, they've done wild fit, in which case, probably not so much with the sickness. Kidding, nice little soft plug there. So, but it's basically anyone. And then on top of that, then you're going to go into these ideal target markets. Once you've gone into the ideal target markets and you kind of figure out what's going on for them, then I think you're going to be able to engage them in a conversation, which is going to allow you, in many cases, to preemptively sell them supplies long before they get sick. I hope that's been helpful to you, Trilin. Next question, Marlene Sui. We sell healthy lemonades to cafes, etc. How do I define my indirect target market? Wow, Marlene, that's a great question. Okay, so guys, break it down. Marlene sells healthy lemonades, and she sells it largely to cafes, etc. I think what she means by cafes, etc. is cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, breakfast bars, whatever the case may be, anywhere that might. So she is selling at a wholesale level. She's not selling retail. Marlene may have started with a lemonade stand in front of her house, but she's moved on, and now she's selling to other people's lemonade stands, which happen to be cafes, restaurants, and so on. Okay, so then she says, how do I define my indirect target market? So she already knows her direct target market, individual markets, cafes, what have you that she's selling to, but who's her indirect target market? Well, Marlene, there are many indirect target markets for you to go after. Here's one, the consumers. Isn't that possible? Think about this for a minute. If you have done such a good job with your branding, let's say you've used social media, you've really engaged your consumers really effectively, and they now have a stated preference for your lemonade, isn't it entirely possible that your consumers will then walk into given cafes and ask for your lemonade specifically? Couldn't that happen? Now, I'm going to use a crazy example, and believe me, I don't hold Coca-Cola up as any example of anything other than really successful business practices. I'm not a fan of the company. I'm not a fan of the product, clearly. But in the meantime, I think there's still a lot we can learn from them. And didn't you notice, like, I don't know so much these days because I don't drink those things, but I remember back in the day, people walked into a restaurant and they walked in and they said, I'll have a Coke, please. And the restaurant would say, oh, no, we only do Pepsi. And they go, oh, all right, I'll have a water. Right? They were so brand loyal. And so what if you were able to stimulate that kind of brand loyalty in a given segment of the consumer market, that they walked into a cafe and said, hey, do you have Marlene's lemonade? And then those cafes are starting to go, what is this Marlene's lemonade thing? So the influencer in that case has been the consumer. Another influencer that you might use might be the other people that are supplying to the cafes. So there are other people supplying stuff to the cafes. And so as a result of identifying who they are, you can now go and potentially work with them and do campaigns with them where you're like, well, if you help me to get into that cafe, I'll help you to get into some of the places that I'm in. So you can do kind of collaborative marketing in that sense. So Marlene, I hope that helps you a little bit. I hope it's a little bit of fun. Incidentally, if that's a little overwhelming for you, don't worry. As we go through the balance of the program, I think you're going to start to see some of the strategies you might use to make that happen. In fact, yeah, you know what? I have an example I'm going to use, and it's going to be in the segment on engagement pitches, which is coming up tomorrow. So in that segment, I think you're going to get some interesting strategies about how to use influencers beyond even what I've shared with you now. So thanks very much. Great question. In fact, you know what? Marlene, where are you? So Marlene, you also are going to get a copy of the Inception Marketing Video Training $2,500 program. You're going to get it for free because I had a lemonade stand when I was a kid, and I just think your question was great. So guys, please get in contact with Marlene and make sure we get that delivered to her once it's available as a product. All right, next question. JB Owen. Is that the JB Owen? JB, it's really great to see you on the call. It was really nice to see you the other night. Nice to see you here. How do I get wholesale buyers interested in my product? They only seemed concerned with profit and margins. Oh, JB, I'm so glad you're here. So you really need to break this down and talk about the steps we're talking about. So how do I get wholesale buyers interested in my product? Well, you're right. They often are only concerned with profits and margins. That's often a concern to them. But remember that they have other concerns, like their concerns might be how to reach a retail market. So if you think a minute for the conversation I just had with Marlene, you're selling to wholesale buyers who are then going on and selling direct to consumers, I suppose. So one of the things you could start to think about is, how do you affect the consumers in a given market so that the consumers are stating a preference for your product and so that they're driving the demand upwards? We often think of driving demand down, but in this case, you might want to try driving demand up. So in other words, you get the market excited enough about your products that they're actually going to the wholesalers and asking directly. So you could go through influencers like that. But let's talk about direct, which is I think what you're more interested in based on your question. So again, you look at your wholesale buyers. So you want to sell to a wholesaler. So what do you want to know? Well, your overall target market is wholesalers of a particular type, I suppose. Then your ideal target market now is going to be different types of wholesalers, because there are different types of people in your industry. You can divide them up by size, geographic location, or product suites. There might be a variety of different things that they sell. Okay, once you've done that, then you're going to go into the psychological evaluation phase. So you're going to take a look and say, what is most important to these companies or to the individual people in these companies? Once you've identified that, the idea then is going to be to engage them there. So you're saying they're only really concerned with profits and margins, okay? But then doesn't that mean that they're also concerned about sales? So about bringing in sales, about actually selling stuff, because that's going to directly relate to profit and margins. So this all gives us a little bit of information about how we might want to approach those people. Now the question is, who should you be approaching inside those wholesale companies? Well, obviously, in many cases, as you've even put here, it's the buyer. There's often, in a wholesale, there's often somebody who's actually a buyer. So that's one way to do it. But I want you to remember to think outside the box here. Years ago, I wrote a script for a movie that I wanted to have made. And I had a film producer friend of mine that I wanted to share it with. But he's a film producer. And so that means every single one of his friends has a script or a movie idea, right? You know how that would be. And so the bottom line is he didn't want to read them. Everybody had one. And he often jokes that, I think the way he and I were joking about it the other day was that, out of 100 friends that have a great script, then, actually 99 of them are complete rubbish. And that's not the bad news. The good news is 1 out of 100 is really good. And now you got a lot of work to do, right? But here's the thing, you got to get through the 99 that are rubbish. And he just, as if he was a friend of mine, he was not interested in reading it at all. So he's the buyer, JB, he's the buyer. And I go, all right, so I can't get the buyer interested. So what did I do? I started thinking about the influencers immediately in proximity. I recognized that my script probably appealed mostly to women. It was a script, a romantic comedy that I thought might appeal mostly to women. So what did I do? I went and found one of the women in his production company. And I said, listen, would you do me a favor and read 4 pages, just the first 4 pages, right? If you just read the first 4 pages, I'd love your feedback. So she read the first 4 pages and finished the whole thing, like in a single sitting. She was in, she loved it. So then she went and she shared it around with all the rest of the female staff in the production company. And then they all together went and knocked on this door and said, hey, you got to read this, right? So again, what you want to think of is what are some of the ways that you can get to that buyer? Because JB, I have the advantage, I don't know a lot of the people that are on this call. I have the advantage of knowing you. And I know that if you could simply get yourself in front of the buyer, you'd be able to make the sale. So instead of thinking about how to make the sale, what you want to start thinking about is A, how to get yourself in front of the buyer, and B, how to get the buyer curious, right? And so one of the ways you might do that is like I just described, identify some of the people that are around the buyer and get them interested and curious about it. But then the other thing is you could look at the buyer themselves and figure out, hey, what's interesting to the buyer? Now, again, guys, when you're selling in a business-to-business environment, where you remember that the sales cycle might be a lot longer, but it might be really rewarding. Whereas somebody who's selling a single item to a single consumer has a quick transaction time potentially. In this case, JB, it might be that one wholesaler could double her sales. The right wholesaler could buy enough from her that it's worth spending months trying to get to this one prospect, right? So in that case, you might identify who the wholesaler is. So JB, you might take a look and say, who is the buyer? Then actually research who the buyer is. Really, personally, who that one buyer is. Do they play golf? What charities are they interested in? What kind of activities do they go on? Do they belong to any clubs? Where might you bump into them? and get really strategic about it. And remember that when you finally do have an opportunity to play golf with them or bump into them or whatever, that you don't immediately show up with your branded stuff and go, hey, you got to have this in your store. No, you get strategic. You speak to them about the things that you know that they're concerned about and earn some credibility and respect with them, which we're going to talk about when we talk about how to create inceptive stories. And then you're going to create a circumstance where you've got the proximity and you've got the credibility, because with more credibility, they're more willing to listen, and you've got the authority, and you're going to be ready to move on. You're going to be ready to actually move toward getting a transaction. So JP, I hope that gives you some help. You'll definitely find when we go into engagement pitches and the steps after that, that you'll get some real tangible strategies that can take this further.
Okay, Eric, we have a lot of people online who are like life coaches and service-based and transformational. So we're going to give you one question that's going to answer a whole bunch of those people.
All right, so what I've just heard from the team is that there's been a pervading question that is similar across a whole lot of you, and they're going to give me that one next. So is that the one I've got here?
Yeah, that's the next one you have.
From video.
Just let the people know we've got some like brick and mortar type businesses that also kind of have some general questions that are, so we're going to give you that.
Yeah, they're curating the questions, and we're going to, I know that some of you are business to consumer and some of you are business to business and some of you are business to government. We're going to do everything we can to get a broad spectrum of the questions here for you. Are you guys having fun? It's so funny. I'm so used to speaking for like thousands of people, and you know, when you crack a joke, there's a little giggle, or when you get people raised, it's a really funny thing to be speaking to you guys, and you're all out there. So here's all I need to know.
You're
is
getting
that,
lots of like, yeah.
okay, cool. I don't get to see those. So, you know, it's like Avatar. Whatever you guys do, they're doing now. All right. So video. Let's.
You're getting lots of that. There's over 500 people on.
Oh, good deal. I know there's hundreds of you guys from all over the world. I'm really impressed that you guys are here, and I hope you're having a lot of fun. By the way, if you are having a lot of fun, go tell your friends, be here. It's going to get better and better as we go through the days. And remember that if they register, they get the recording, they get access to the recording for a day or two after this, instead of having to go buy it later. So anyway, video. Let's see. So this is, can you provide an example of a service-based business? For instance, as a life coach, my overall target market is people who want to transform their lives. No, video. Video? No. That is not your overall target market. I'll come back to that. Now, the next part is, how would I subdivide this group from a psychological perspective to determine my ideal target market? Okay, well, I can't even get to that second question because, Vidya, the first one is, what did I say in developing your overall target market? No limiters. You're trying to go after monkey nuts. Listen, she says, as a life coach, my overall target market is people who want to transform their lives. Let me be very clear that there is a whole bunch of people out there that need to transform their lives and don't want to. That is the much bigger market. If you are simply going to go out there and market toward the people who want to transform their lives, then you're competing against every other life coach that's out there. And they're all going after the people who want to transform their lives. They're all building SEO into their website to attract those same people. They're all buying the same Facebook advertising. They're all buying the same Google AdWords. And so all of those people are competing. All of those life coaches and performance coaches are all competing for the same people who want to be transformed. Vidya, and if you're the Vidya, I think you are. I know a few videos, but I think I know which one this is. Then I believe that you've seen that a whole lot of people that have done our WildFit program signed up for our program, and prior to signing up for it, did not want health transformation. In fact, many of them had given up entirely on health transformation. They'd completely given up on it. They'd done 27 diets, nothing ever worked. They vowed they would never, ever do another one, and we got them. And there were other people that never, ever bought one in their lives because they didn't believe in it, and we got them too. We don't want the people who want to lose weight. We don't want to have people who want more energy. I mean, we want them too, let me be clear, but we want all of the people, and especially we want the much larger market of the people that are as yet unaware that transformation is possible. I know, I'm a little bit passionate about this one. I hope it's helping. So video, let's talk, let's break it down. The first thing is, your overall target market is everyone. Now, you might not want to go after everyone because you may not be particularly interested in providing transformation coaching to 5-year-olds. And you might not be particularly interested in providing coaching to, men, you might want to be women or whatever. Right? Every one of you that's in a life coaching or service-based environment, your overall target market might not actually be everyone. Your overall target market might be specific groups of people, and that's fine. And this is where having a niche can be very valuable, because I have to say that when somebody comes along and they say to me that they're a life coach, well, what I want to see from them is that they are handling every single area of life at a peak level before I would hire them as a life coach. In other words, if somebody comes up to me and says they're a relationship coach, well, I can accept that they can be a world-class at relationships, but not necessarily world-class at health, if that makes sense to you. In fact, the very first time I heard the word life coach was really interesting. I, at that point, was contemplating getting involved in doing some public speaking and stuff. I had a number of problems. One was that I was terrified of it. Two is that I was terrified of it. And three is that I'd rather die than public speak. But at that stage, I did have a desire to want to help people transform. And then one day, a friend of mine came up to me and he goes, "Hey, I know what I'm doing with my next career. I'm going to be a life coach." Now, bear in mind, this is 1990 or 1991 or something like that. And I said, life coach, what is a life coach? Is this where you follow people around with pom-poms and go, live your life, live your life? I mean, what is a life coach? I had no idea. I hadn't heard the term before. And they said, oh, well, a life coach is, he said, a life coach is somebody who helps people live a way more extraordinary and amazing life. And I said, all right, that kind of makes sense to me. And then he said, and I said, so what does that specifically mean? And he goes, well, it means I'm going to help people master their finances. Now, I try not to be overly judgmental inside my head, but I'm human. And the first thought that popped in my head is, okay, but dude, you owe me money. Like, you have debt everywhere. Now, I didn't say this out loud, but my immediate thought was, hey, there's not a high degree of congruency here. And then I said, oh, okay, and what else? And he goes, I'm going to help people with their relationships. And I was like, wow, like this guy, that's something he can help people. He's very good at starting relationships. I'd never seen one last more than a day or two, but he was good at starting them, right? But, and so the one that really got me was he said, yeah, I'm going to help people have an incredible, a healthy and vibrant life. And this is because that's a topic that I'm so fascinated by and so interested by. I was really irked by the fact that this guy was not in ideal shape. And listen, I'm not being judgmental. If you know me at all, you'll know. If I see somebody that's, say, for example, vastly overweight, I don't regard it as their fault. I regard it as a fault of the food industry. But that does not make that person an ideal health coach. I hope you'd agree. This guy had this situation going on here, and he was not even in his 30s. Like he couldn't even, if he looked down, in the shower, and he looked down, he couldn't even see his feet. So I didn't think maybe he should be the ideal health coach. So one of the things that we want to do when we're working in that environment is we want to live the ideal thing when you recognize that you're in a life coaching environment is that you need to be in lifestyle marketing. You need people to see that you really are living what you teach. In my example in WildFit, it would not do for me to be teaching WildFit if I did not have this abundant energy that I live my life with, and that if I wasn't trim and fit and healthy. And so that's one of the first things to consider in that world. Now, when we look at your overall target market, all right, so you may decide that if you have a bit of a niche, for example, you could be like a friend of mine is a divorce coach, right? So she does this really cool stuff around conscious uncoupling and helping people, guide them through the process. And she has these really cool, I can't think of the name of them now. I wish I could, but basically retreats where she helps people and guides them through how to have a divorce in a way that really launches them into the next chapter of their life in the most productive way. Because I think you probably know a lot of people lose a year to their life having negative divorces, right? So she helps people not do that. So she's got a really nice niche in that sense. So in her case, her target market would be anybody who's getting a divorce or sadly who might be getting a divorce, right? And so her overall target market might actually be a little bit niched. But if you are a generic life coach, then your overall target market may well be pretty much everybody. So regardless what the overall target market is, then let's talk a little bit about how you would then subdivide the target market. Well, the key thing with the target market is you're looking for tight psychologies, right? So even in the case of Sarah's business with the divorce coaching, there are a variety of different people going through different types of divorce, right? There are very wealthy people going through divorces. There are people going through divorces that had a prenuptial agreement. There are people going through a divorce that didn't have a prenuptial agreement. There are people who have tremendous financial lack that are going through a divorce. There are people going through a divorce that have children. There are people going through a divorce that don't have children. There are people going through a divorce because there was infidelity. There are people going through divorces for all kinds of different reasons. And so what we begin to realize is that it's going to be really interesting to look at those ideal target markets and figure out how to market to them. But here's the other thing. Remember that a key part of this is addressing their psychology, right? So she may take a look and say, okay, what are, if we just use the kind of generic market of people that are getting divorced, one of the things she might want to look at is what are the big concerns that people have after divorce? Well, here's some of their concerns. Money, right? Well, what's going to happen to the money? Is there money? How much is it going to cost? How's the money going to get divided? Who gets to keep the house? I mean, division of assets might be a really big thing. But another thing might be health. Because all of a sudden, you're like, you come out of a divorce and you're like, wow, you know, maybe I let myself go a little during. And a lot of people do this. They get married and then they get comfortable and then they, you know, they thicken up a little. It's okay, it happens. But all of a sudden they're single and going, whoa, 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 spare tire's got to go. So health might be really important to them. Here's another one. How about this? Parenting. How are we going to parent? How am I going to get along with my ex so we can co-parent effectively? Right? These are really powerful thought processes that are going through. And so rather than, you know, go out and advertise herself as a divorce coach, what she might want to do is produce a video online that's all about how to do effective co-parenting post-divorce, right? People are going to watch that and they're going to get engagement from it. They're going to build credibility from it. And the next thing you know, they're going to want to know more from her. Next thing you know, boom, they're coming off to one of her divorce retreats. So remember that what we're doing here is we're saying overall target market. In her case, it might be anybody who is getting divorced or is contemplating divorce. And then the ideal target might be to delve into the different types of people that are going through that. And then the key step is, again, to go into the psychology. What are they most concerned about? And let me address that concern. Let me talk to that concern. And in doing that, build the credibility and authority. Now, we're going to do that in Inceptive Stories tomorrow, that step. That's why I'm not going into so much detail with it. So I hope this helps you a little bit with the intangible side. I do want to address niching a little bit, and this is more of a business plan issue than an inceptive marketing issue. But it really, in marketing, in a sense, there's 4 different marketing models. As a matter of fact, I'll do them up here, but we got to remember to take that down when we do the next recording, just remind me. So I hope you guys can see this okay on the webcam here, but there are 4 different marketing models. One is represented by this graphic here, which says, hey, this is a narrow offering to a narrow market. And then you have another one that's represented like this, which is a narrow offering to a wide market. And then you can have something else, which is a wide offering to a narrow market. And then you can have something else, which is this, which is a wide offering to a wide market. Okay, so just to recap, we're talking about a narrow offering to a narrow market, a narrow offering to a wide market, a wide offering to a narrow market, and a wide to wide. So what's really interesting here is that when you look at these things, the biggest temptation is this one. This is the one that most people want to do. They want to be all things to all people. So very often in the life coaching world, we're talking about life coaching for everyone. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. In fact, I would suggest that there's only one person who's ever really pulled that off effectively, and that would be Tony Robbins. And what I mean is that he's kind of built a business around being the original life coach to a large degree, and he offers life coaching to everyone. But what he did is he celebritized himself in that space. And I would tell you that he, in some areas, I think he's done much better when he started to niche himself down, because what he did in the last few years is he started doing something else. And that is that he started offering business training to entrepreneurs. And this is a much higher end product for him to sell, right? It's got a much deeper profit margin than trying to be all things to all people. This model does not really work in business. It doesn't really work. I often ask clients, like, give me an example of a wide to wide market that did work. And so people will often come to me and they go, what about Walmart? For those of you who are in North America and you know Walmart, or if you're in Britain even, I think we've got Walmart there now as well. So they go, well, Walmart's a wide to wide. No, Walmart is not a wide to wide. Walmart is a wide to narrow. They sell just about everything to a very specific socioeconomic group of people. They sell almost everything to a very specific socioeconomic group. You might take a look, if you're in the United Kingdom, you might take a look at something like Debenhams. It's a department store, so they sell a huge variety of things, but they also aim for a very specific socioeconomic demographic, right? So they're wide to narrow. This model here does not work. And I know there are some of you out there now, matter of fact, probably popping up in the comments any second now, somebody's going to say Amazon, right? Well, Amazon is the closest representation in the business world to wide. It's the closest representation there is. And let's point out that Amazon has only recently started making money. right? For all the sales they've generated, they've only recently started making money. But on top of that, I would put to you that Amazon is not a wide to wide. I would put to you that Amazon made their name and made their initial impression on the market by being a narrow to wide. We sell books to everyone, right? That's what they started off as, books to everyone. And then they started widening up the offer to create something that looks like this, but it's not. Because if you really think about it, isn't Amazon a marketplace of people, some of whom are selling narrow to narrow, some of whom are selling narrow to wide, and some of whom are selling wide to narrow. And the whole market is built that way. So inside Amazon, there's books for everyone. Inside Amazon, there's magnesium for marathon runners. Inside Amazon, there's all kinds of products for specific niche markets. So I would suggest to you that when you're setting your business model up, whether you're bricks and mortar or whether you're esoteric or whether you're intangibles, what you want to do is pick one of these three and not this one, because that's just going to be too difficult for the market to get their head around. All right. So now I've got another question here from Marilee Taras. Marilee Taras. Hey, Marilee, nice to have you here. And what her question is, we have a roller skating school and our target market is everybody between 4 to 60. Okay, so that's your overall target market. Is the right way to narrow it down by age, for example, 8 to 10, 13 to 17? Yeah, sure, Marilee, you could do that. That's one way. When you say is the right way to do this, let me be very clear. Until you've tested this in a marketing campaign, you won't know the right way. But if you're asking, are you using the right methodology? This is one right way to do it, is you could break it down by age. There are different reasons that somebody, say in their 50s, might want to go roller skating than somebody that's in their teens. So that means that when you're creating the advertisement, now I've seen this before. I've seen these places where they have like public roller skating events and stuff like that. And they just have a big poster that says public skate, right? That's supposed to appeal to everyone. Do you know who that appeals to? People who are interested in roller skating and looking for a place to roller skate. Well, wait a minute now. Isn't there an entire market of people out there that haven't put on a pair of skates for years? And if they just could be reminded how much fun it was, they would do it again. So we want to get more strategic about the marketing than just putting up a thing that says roller skating. Most people won't even see that. But if we do subdivide, so for example, you've subdivided by age and you could have special events based on the age, I'm sure you probably already do. But could you not also subdivide by other things like relationships? Could you have, for example, couples? You could market directly toward couples. You could have like a thing, an ad campaign that talks about, hey, some dates are meant to be soft and furry and fuzzy and, nice candles. Remember the candles and dinner and what have you? And yet the next one, hey, get out and do something different. And one of the things I might do if I were you is I would produce something that says, 5 great activities for couples. And I would list 5 great activities for couples. And I'd make an infographic of that. And one of the infographics would be roller skating. And then there might be attached to that infographic a clue of where they could go roller skating. And all of a sudden you've got these couples that are looking at this infographic going, wow, here's a list of 5 things we haven't done in our relationship. We could go for a hike in the mountains. We could go skinny dipping at the hot springs, whatever. Oh, look, roller skate. I haven't roller skated in years. You've never roller skated? Oh, don't worry. I'll hold you. By the way, isn't that a little fun and romantic? And it's all cliched in the movies that is already. Great little campaign, right? So I would consider breaking it down by relationship status. Here's another one I'd consider. Single, want to meet people, want to move fast, speed skating on skates. I don't know. I'm saying this is how you start thinking. You start thinking to yourself, what are the different psychologies that we could be dealing with here? And it's entirely possible that you could be targeting toward people, single people in their 20s and 30s, and you could be organizing events around roller skating for singles. And what you would do there is you wouldn't, let me be very clear, you wouldn't market to people to come as individuals. You'd market as an activity. Right? You'd market as an activity. Hey, get your girlfriends together and learn and come to the greatest type of speed dating there ever is. It's all on skates. And people come and they get to meet each other and connect and what have you. So are you beginning to notice that when you've got to narrow down into these different markets, immediately there can be really neat ideas about how to appeal to that given market. So Marilee, I hope that helps you. And I'd love, by the way, for Marilee and for everybody else, what you should know is that there is an inception marketing book in development. It's been in development for a while. WildFit kind of caught us by surprise and took off as a business. And so I've had to table that for a little while. But one of the things that we're going to be looking for in that book is case studies. And we already have many from clients from over the years. Really cool, examples where people took like one thing that we showed them and just immediately from like one email doubled up registration for their events or sold a lot more product or whatever the case may be. We've got lots of them, but we're looking for more. And so if you and I interact on this, or even if we don't, if you use this stuff and it really creates phenomenal results for you, please send them into our help desk or send them to us on Facebook or what have you. And there's a chance you could end up getting featured in the book, which, by the way, couldn't that be cool for you as well? All right, so next question, please. Dave Cousins. Real estate is probably one of the most competitive industries out there, and individual agents are competing against mega teams with massive marketing budgets. How do you compete and stand out as an individual agent? Wow, yeah, that's really true. I mean, it is a very competitive market, and you're right. One agent might be competing against these mega networks and so on. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, but let's go through the steps, right? So I might handle this differently if you and I are sitting down and having a metaphorical coffee together, but let's just go through the steps of this so that it's a good learning environment for everybody. So the first thing, Dave, would be, who's your overall target market? Now, I don't know that. It might be that you specialize in, for example, commercial real estate or residential real estate, or you might specialize in a given geographic region, or you might specialize in, family homes or investment properties. I don't know that for you. But when you figure out what your overall target market is, that's the beginning. And then when you've decided from there where you want to market from an ideal market perspective, so you're going to try and figure out who's your ideal target markets within that, then you're going to start to get an idea of how you are going to be able to get to those people and how you're going to create some brand recognition for them. Old school, you rent the bus, the bus seats around and you get your picture up everywhere and all that kind of stuff. But I want to go strategic. I don't want to go old school. This is not that. This is a more strategic campaign. So let's say, I think that you could either be looking for listings or you could be looking to sell homes, right? You could be on either side of the transaction. You're probably interested in both. And in an ideal situation, you probably like when you get to handle both. But so what I'm getting at here is that you're going to have some prospects that you probably want to get a hold of because you want to help them sell their house. And you're going to have some prospects that you want to help them buy a house. Okay, excellent. So one of the things that I might take a look at is one of your, so let's just back up. So what that might mean is, in a sense, you have two overall target markets. One of your overall target markets might be all homeowners that may one day need to sell their property, which basically means all homeowners, right? But then you have another overall target market, which is anybody out there that could potentially buy a home, right? I mean, if you're, by the way, Dave, I'm making the assumption here we're talking residential because the question doesn't make it clearer to me. But you understand that these would be two different overall target markets. Well, if we move over to the all homeowners that may eventually want to sell their home one day, then let's take a look at what are some of the things that those people are concerned with. What are they valued with? And let's remember that we're in this for the long term, right? Strategic marketing here is about the long term. We're not necessarily trying to close the sale today. We're trying to cultivate many, many sales for years to come. All right, so if we were to go after homeowners, say, in a particular neighborhood that may one day want to sell the property. So now what are they worried about? Well, they're worried about all kinds of different things. They might be worried about homeowner insurance. They might be worried about landscaping. They might be worried about home valuation. They might be worried about home security. There's a bunch of different things they'd be worried about. Okay, so once we've done some psychological evaluation, the next thing we want to look at is secondary targets. In other words, the influencers. So who influences the homeowners? Well, I mean, where do they shop? What do they buy? What kind of services are being offered to them? They probably, if they're in an affluent neighborhood, they might have a lawyer they use with some regularity. They might have a company that provides their security or alarm system, or they might have, they might drive particular types of cars. It's important to kind of understand who out there might be influencing them. So if you, for example, got to, let's say landscaping let's just randomly pick landscaping. So you've now identified that there's a landscaping company nearby that might be a good influencer for you. Well, so one of the things you might want to do is establish a relationship with the landscaper, where the landscaper is, you become kind of their preferred real estate partner. So when they're going out and working with prospects, they identify people that are landscaping with the intention of boosting up the value of their home because they might want to sell it eventually. Well, that person could now be feeding you leads, and maybe you take care of them with a commission or what have you, but you're using an influencer in this case to get yourself into that market. One landscaper might be able to bring you, 5 home sellers a year or 10 home sellers a year or more. So rather than going directly after the property owners, you start to look out at the influencers that might be helping as well. The other thing that you might want to look at in dealing directly with the homeowners is going to them about their concerns, like we talked about before. Maybe they're concerned with their property valuation. Maybe they're concerned with getting making sure their property is really nicely secured. So one of the things that you might want to do is do a campaign where you're actually helping solve those problems for them, right? Well, how might you do that? Well, there's any number of different ways. But for example, could you put together a brochure that spoke to local crime levels and best practices around security and some basic things that they could do when they're at home? For example, you could give them a 5-point checklist on how to do this, this, and this. Well, I know this may sound out there for you because you're in real estate and what do you care about their home security or what have you. But what you're becoming is a resource to them. You're building your credibility and your authority with them. And so what's happening is that they start taking your advice about stuff. And then the next thing you know, you're able to talk to them, for example, about their home valuation or insurance, and you're going to start to learn who they are. And the next thing you know, they're going to be like, you know what? I need to sell my home. Where would you go for that? Well, it just so happens I can help you with that. Right? So again, you're thinking of it in terms of if you met them at a party, right? Let's say you met a prospect at a party. Would you immediately walk up to them at the party and go, hi, I'm a real estate agent. I'd like to buy your home from you, or I'd like to facilitate the sale of your house, or I'd like to sell your house. No, you wouldn't do that. You would make small talk. You'd get to know them a little bit. And as you got to know them, you'd be talking about topics that might be of interest to them. And if you did that well, you would create rapport. And with rapport, you'd be able to create credibility, and they'd start thinking of you as a credible resource of information. And then you'd create authority where when you gave them advice, they would follow it, right? And by the way, there are other ways you could do this that are more mass market than, say, dropping a brochure at their house. Couldn't you create some really great videos? Dave, seriously, couldn't you? I mean, you could go on and you could create a really amazing video series about how to improve the value of your house, or, what the best kind of alarm systems to have are, or, some great feng shui tips about making your house a more livable place and all this kind of stuff. But the point is you could create that video series all about helping people improve the quality of their home. And as a result of that, they're going, wow, this is really fascinating. And then, by the way, if you've got them watching those videos, couldn't you then also have a video that says, hey, how to make sure you pick the right estate agent, right real estate agent to represent you when you are ready to sell your home? Or could you not offer at this point, once you've got a bunch of followers, and say, by the way, if you would like a free valuation of your house, I'll actually come over and do a real estate assessment of your house and let you know how much your house is going to be worth. But you see, what you're doing here is you're becoming a resource to them. Look, guys, marketing is not what it used to be. Marketing used to be running around with a net. Marketing used to be running around with a net and trying to catch butterflies. That's what it used to be, and it kind of worked. But you know what? These days, the butterflies are much smarter than they were before. They see the net coming and they're gone. Isn't it true? Isn't marketing harder than it ever used to be? Those butterflies see the net and they're gone. The other thing is everybody has a net. So you have all these people running around with the net trying to catch all these butterflies. The butterflies are smart. They're camouflaged. They're hiding. They're fast. They're getting away. When I'm saying to you, build a garden with beautiful flowers in it, add value, and the butterflies will come to you. So Dave, I hope that helps answer your question a little bit. Next one. Several people have asked if I'll be a date coach. No. Should we do, guys, let me know, should we do a webinar on dating? Tell me if we need to do a webinar on dating. What's funny is for many of you who know WildFit, you guys think of WildFit as a nutrition brand. What you don't really know is that WildFit is a lifestyle brand around everything from food to relationships to everything. So it wouldn't be impossible for us. We have a brand. It's related to my time with the Bushmen, and it's called Two Fires. And it's based on the idea that at every Bushman camp I've ever been to, there's been two fires, one for the men and one for the women. And some of the stuff we've learned from those Bushmen have been unbelievable in the areas of relationship and also in parenting. So it's not impossible. We might do a relationship dating advice webinar one day. If enough of you shout for it, I bet the team will make me do it.
There's actually a whole bunch coming in right now.
Maybe one day, no promises. All right, Amy, a real question now. Amy, For networking, what if the person asks us about ourselves and our business first before we have a chance to hear what they are looking for? Well, in that case, Amy, I've probably trained them. So I'm kidding. There are other people that give this advice too. I'm just joking around. If they do that, Amy, you know, you're kind of stuck with one of two, you know, options, or let's call it three. One option is, all right, answer them. They asked. But the other one is to say, oh, I'd love to share that with you, but, you know, reverse it back on them. But, you know, to you two, you go first. I'd be willing to do that. Or the other one is that you give them a really quick sort of snappy elevator pitch. You go, oh, I do this. What about you? And then you become the interviewer. You become the questioner. The more they speak, the easier it is for you to know how to hook yourself in and create value for them. Remember, everything you're looking for is how to create value for them. And think about that as a difference compared to the way people have done marketing for all these years. The way people do marketing normally is they walk up and they just talk about themselves. Oh my God, let me tell you about this newfangled product. It's this big and it's got these twins and it can do this for you and the features and benefits and features and benefits. Oh, and by the way, special discounted offer today, right? That was selling in the 80s. Selling today is getting to know your prospect. And so if you're in a networking environment, and somebody does that with you, Amy, what I would suggest is give them a brief answer, but don't get caught up in the desire. You know, people just seem to like their own voices a lot of times. I remember hearing, and this is silly, but I remember hearing a long time ago, you know, God or evolution gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk, right? And so what I would say is if they do put you in that situation, answer them briefly and then move to the next question that you're asking them. And what you're looking for in asking them questions is you're looking for real information. By the way, please, when you ask a question, and Amy, I'm sure you do this already, but I really want you to think about this. When you ask the question, really listen to the answer. You know, like really listen to the answer. In fact, if you're already thinking of your next question while they're answering you, then to a large degree, I'd say you're doing it wrong. You really want to listen to their answer and engage with it and ask a question that's contextual to the answer they gave you. That's real conversation. Let's not do this tactical networking. Let's do really strategic networking. In fact, I want to add one more thing to this about networking, Amy. You've stimulated a thought. And since Amy stimulated a thought, we're going to give Amy, actually, Amy, let's see. What do you think we should give Amy? Amy's now sitting on the edge of her seat, right? Like, which one? Let's do another Inception marketing.
She's like, yay.
She's just, yay. She doesn't got to. So Amy, Inception marketing video training for you as well, because you stimulated a thought. That's our third one of the day. So that's a $2,500 package. As soon as it's edited and ready, you'll get your copy of it. And the reason is you stimulated this thought, which I think people are going to get a lot of value from. So when you are networking, when you're thinking about like maybe joining a networking group or a mastermind group or something like that, there's kind of two different thought processes you can have. One, I would call, let's call it transactional, and the other one, let's call it strategic, right? It's something else. And what that means is that very often people join a new mastermind or they join a new networking group, and their intention is to trigger something, to get partners, to get sales. They're looking for resources and they're there transactionally to get value right away. Hell, they've invested some time to be there. Maybe they've paid a membership fee and they're there to get money. They're there to get resources or contacts or something like that. And so they show up very tactically, transactionally, right? On the other hand, somebody might walk into that same networking environment and they might not be so tactical. They might be more strategic. And what they might do is seek to create credibility and authority within that network by adding value. Some of you guys might be familiar with Business Networking International, or BNI as it's more commonly known. BNI is a phenomenal organization. I really love what they do. And what they essentially do is create these really powerful masterminds. And in each mastermind, there's only allowed to be one person representing an industry. So there can only be one lawyer, one chiropractor, one massage therapist, one whatever. There can only be one of each. And the reason being is that the goal of everybody at the group is to go out and help get business for everybody else. So that's why there's only one chiropractor. So if you know somebody who needs a chiropractor, you refer all the business to the person in your group. BNI is a fantastic organization. If you've never been to one of their meetings, I really suggest checking it out. And a friend of mine, Ivan Meisner, he started BNI, and he says this all the time: givers get. givers get. And so in networking, Amy, beyond the issue of the question is, how can you add as much value to the person as well? So when they ask you a question, you got to think in terms of how can I add value? And I got a very solid lesson of this when some years ago, I was invited to join a very high-level mastermind, a very, very high-level mastermind. I mean, I'm talking about some of the very most successful people in the industry, celebrity-level success. And so I got invited to join this mastermind. And at the same time, a friend of mine had also joined. And here's the thing. I want you to know that what I'm about to describe is going to make it sound like I was brilliant and he wasn't. That's totally not true. He's very brilliant. The difference is that I did not have something to sell. So listen to what happened. He went into the environment and recognized that there were all these resources, and he had a huge projects that he wanted to launch around the world. And he went in there and he was transactional. He wanted meetings. He was immediately, how big is your list of people you can connect with? Who do you know? What resources do you have? He was like really, really transactional. He was so transactional that if he had a meeting with somebody and then somebody of a higher caliber wanted to meet at the same time, he'd blow off that meeting and go to the other meeting, which of course I understand when you've got a big mission that you've got to be decisive about what you want from the market. But unfortunately, what it created in that environment was a reputational for being transactional, a reputational for being self-interested. Now, I joined the group at the same time, but I didn't have any projects going at that point. I was sort of between businesses, and I'd sort of semi-retired, and I was working on other things, and I really wasn't so worried about any given mission at that point. I had stuff I was working on, but it was so for example, we were working very heavily on development of WildFit at that stage, but we were not needing any help with it yet. It was, we didn't have like huge products to sell. I didn't have anything. So I showed up there with nothing really that I needed help with. And so I came and people sat down and had lunch with me, and I ended up giving. People would ask me for marketing help, or they'd ask me for business coaching, or they'd ask me for health coaching. And so I would end up in this powerful, powerful network building social credit by accident. I want to be clear. I'm not saying I was any more brilliant than my friend. I'm saying I was accidentally more brilliant, because for the next 4 years, all I did was help and help and help and help and help. And so then one day when it became time for us to start going out and looking for people to help us and partners to help us with WildFit, it happened so fast that we went from 150 clients a year to about 4,000 clients in a year. That fast. Now, we built scalability and we were ready for it, but the real reason that everybody helped me was I created so much social credit with them first that they were like jumping at the bit to say, can we support you? Can we help you? So when we're networking, we want to seek, and by the way, Stephen Covey, guys, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey. His work has been foundational in my life. Principle-Centered Leadership, one of my absolute favorite books. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what is one of the habits? Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Inception Marketing, right there in Stephen Covey's book. So Amy, thanks very much for stimulating that. I hope you enjoy the product when you get it. Next one, Joan Vaccaro. I'm an interior designer, which is a more costly product, limiting factor. She's saying it's a more costly product, so there's a barrier to entry, as well as one that builds intimacy over time with the client. Sometimes we are almost psychologists. Do I target that comfort intimacy factor up front? Yes. Yes, Joan, yes. Now, again, when you're dealing with interior design, you're dealing with high-end services, and as a result, you're dealing with high-end, financially speaking, high-end prospects. These people are very discerning. So there's a number of things for you to recognize. I know you know some of this, Joan, so because we're not sitting face-to-face, I'm just going to say some of the more obvious things first. The first thing is that in your business, there can be nothing more powerful for you than social credit. What I mean by that is that you are going into somebody's home and you're making their home a haven. You're making their home a place of celebration or of relaxation or of luxury or whatever it is that they want, but you're doing something very, very personal for them. Now, this brings up a couple of thoughts. The one is that for people to invite you into that level of intimacy to their life is going to require a very high level of trust, right? The second thing is that once you've done that work for some people, then that unbelievable high level of trust is transferable to their friends, isn't it? I'm going to assume at this point that much of the business you get probably does come from friends of clients, because in the interior design business, that's always one of the ways. What I want to suggest to you is that maybe you could get even more strategic about it by really recognizing that your friends that your clients really are a fabulous, fabulous source of leads for you. And so rather than letting them do word of mouth on an incidental basis, that you really try to formalize that to some degree. And so there are a number of ways that you might be able to do that. For example, you're an interior designer. That means that some of your clients are interested in, I'm going to guess, like really unique pieces, special furniture, artwork, all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things I might suggest if I were you is I would consider having an open house at your studio. And the way I would do the open house is that I would have I know my WildFit clients, you're going to be amazed that I'm going to say this, but you might have a cheese and wine party at your, now it will be dairy-free cheese, never mind. But the point is that you might have some kind of like a champagne thing at your studio. And what you're going to do is you're going to invite your clients on the basis that you've gone out and secured maybe a guest speaker, maybe a local designer who's really well known, or an art connoisseur of some sort. And you're going to have that speaker come in to your studio, and they're going to do a presentation, and they're going to schmooze with people and network with people. And then you're going to tell your friends, listen, we have space for some extra people. If you would like to bring some of your friends of a similar quality to you, then I'd really like you to go ahead and bring them along. Now, two things are going to happen as a result of this. It's entirely possible that your existing clients are going to come to the studio and they're going to end up buying stuff because they're there, or they might buy some art because they're there, or they might decide there's another room they want to get done. That's all fine and good. That's excellent. But more than that, you've created an environment for them to bring their friends over, because their friends have been asking them, haven't they? I mean, one of the biggest things we get with WildFit is, one of the biggest sources of business we get from people with WildFit is people look at their friends and go, you look amazing, I'll have what you're having, right? Well, don't they do the same thing when you've done this for somebody's house? Don't their friends walk in and go, wow, that's nice. How did you do that? You know what? Why don't you come with me? We've got this wine tasting thing over at the studio. There's a speaker coming in to talk about art. Why don't you come along? It's really exclusive. Come along. Now, not only can you potentially sell more to your existing clientele, but you can sell more to their friends, because not only are they referring their friends, but you've given them a really easy way to bring their friends in. So, and remember that if you've now brought them into your studio, right? If you've brought them into the studio, then what's really interesting there is that you are able to build a lot more intimacy because you're there with them face to face. It's really helpful. There are a couple of other things that you might want to do. You could do a YouTube channel where you talk about, where you break down interesting new designers that you're really excited about, or different artists that you're really excited about, and review those things on your YouTube channel, and you'd be amazed at the level of intimacy you can create through video these days. I am constantly blown away by people walking up to me in airports and restaurants on the street because they've seen my videos on YouTube, and they walk up like they know me. I was in Cafe Gratitude in San Diego 2 weeks ago, and one of the servers just walked up to me like she knew me. She's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. We'd never met before. And so maybe you could do something like that where you're providing educational content about interior design, about, maybe some feng shui if you're into that, or art and that kind of stuff, that would really help you to build intimacy without even needing to be face-to-face with them. All right. So now we're going to move into the next module. Is that what we're doing next?
So there's one more question.
Oh, there's one more question?
An hour left.
Okay.
There's lots and lots of questions, but you might want to take the next question.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm going to take the next question. What we're doing here is, okay, so just so you know, syntax-wise, I know that we've been going for a little while here. Matter of fact, should we do a 2-minute break? Are we hearing from people?
Yeah, we can.
Guys, you tell us. Do you need a break, or should we just power on? I don't need one. We can just power on through. What are we getting?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
So guys, 3-minute break. The screen. Don't go anywhere. Well, go somewhere, but don't stay logged in. See you in 3 minutes. And what we're going to do when we're back in 3 minutes is we're going to do. I've got one more question. And what was that? Oh, I got you. I've got one more question. I understand. And then we're going to record the next module. And this module is going to be fascinating. It's all about market research and how you can conduct market research with no budget at all, or with a budget. It's going to be very exciting. So 3-minute break starting now. Or if you're not back yet, come on back. We're starting. All right. So first of all, I want to say I am really, really impressed. When we decided to do this, take you guys behind the scenes and let you watch this program, we had a lot of people saying to us, you're not going to be able to keep that kind of engagement for, that many hours and online and all that kind of stuff. And you guys are so engaged. We're getting so many comments and so many questions, and also so much. There are hundreds and hundreds of you online right now from all around the world. So I want to thank you for your commitment, and I'm going to keep pouring out value as best I can. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to take one more question. This question's coming in from Amber, who I believe is on Vancouver Island. And then we're going to switch over, and I'm going to record the segment on market research. And then we'll take some more Q&A up until our time is done. So let's jump right back in. Amber's question is, thank you for doing this training. I have one question that is not specific to marketing, but to business overall. As a mom of 4 and a CEO of 2 businesses, I'm finding my time very stretched. If you could give some advice to someone in my shoes, could you please break down overall business priorities and where inception marketing fits into that plan? Okay, so Amber, this is a little bit more of a general business question than an inception marketing question. And you know what? I'm going to take it anyway because I think it's really important. Let's get really clear that for most people that start a business, they do it with a tremendous sense of optimism. And business owners are some of the most optimistic people in the world. I'll prove it to you. If you consider that 4 out of 5 businesses won't make it to the 5th year, you have to be a really big optimist to jump into something that has an 80% failure rate, right? So business owners are fundamentally optimistic. And then more than that, the 20% of them that do succeed to that 5-year mark often end up succeeding by working harder than they ever did before, by paying themselves not enough money, by letting their health slide, by letting family time slide. I mean, the entrepreneurship, when it's practiced badly, is like a really bad form of self-imposed slavery. It's very unfortunate when people do that. When you learn to prioritize properly, both in terms of your day-to-day tasks and in terms of the macro strategic things that you're talking about now, entrepreneurship really does mean doing some of the right things, working really hard for a short period of time in order to create a life that most people can't even dream of. It really is the ultimate expression of personal freedom. But your question is key to how you get there. So here you are. You're a mom of 4, 2 of whom I've met, and I think are fantastic. And it seems like you're doing a great job of being a mom and a CEO of 2 businesses. So you're juggling fairly well already, I'd like to acknowledge. But I also get that there's times when maybe it gets ahead of you. And so you said here, I'm finding my time very stretched. And can you give me some advice about how to break down overall business priorities? So where does inception marketing fit in? Well, I think of money, if you think about it, I think of money in your business as being the blood. Money is the blood of your business, right? You're, without it, there's nothing, right? So I don't know what could be more important than making sure that you have consistent and predictable streams of revenue coming into your business. Because you can have hired the very best people, you can have the best equipment, you can have the best products, you can have everything the best, but if you don't have that money flowing in, if you don't have that blood flow, if you don't have oxygen, then there is no business. And so I believe that strategic marketing should absolutely be one of the highest priorities of any business. And I say that very clearly, having made the mistake myself of not doing it that way. When I started my very first company, it was an industry that I was very familiar with. I'd been working in the industry for 6 or 7 years already. We were selling mobile computers, we were selling wireless networking, we were selling repair services, and I was very good at selling, but I also wanted to build a business. And I had to balance this issue of how do I build a business that is going to become a real company, but also how do I keep the cash flow rich? And so I had to figure that out. And I did not do it very well for the first 3 or 4 years. I really didn't. I struggled a lot. And it was in about the 4th year that I had this big breakthrough around that. And that breakthrough, Amber and the rest of you, had to do with people. It had to do with recognizing what needed to happen to not only prioritize things properly, but also to prioritize delegation properly. Because frankly, without people, there's no leverage. And without that, entrepreneurship becomes slavery. And so between years 4 and 6, I managed to transition my business so that I no longer had to go to work at all. I had what we call business freedom. And the next time I started a company in a similar industry with a similar amount of money, instead of taking 6 years to get there, it only took me 18 months. So let's talk about how did I prioritize that stuff effectively. The first thing is, let's talk about the minor, the small, the prioritizing of day to day. This is so basic, Amber. You're going to either know it already, or you're going to know it, but you haven't been doing it, and it's going to remind you, or maybe it's going to be a big breakthrough for you. And for the rest of you, same thing. So I want you to imagine that in a given day, let's say you have 2 tasks that you need to get done, 2 projects that you have to work on. One of them is a project that you love. I mean, you really love it. It's like so much fun for you. You know, like if you're an accountant, it's a spreadsheet. If you're a creative, it's a blank piece of paper and you need to design something cool, whatever, right? It's something you love. And the other project is something you, well, don't love or dislike a great deal or maybe even hate a little, right? We all have tasks like that from time to time. So how do most people prioritize in a given day? Which job do they do first when they walk in the office? Well, humans are pretty predictable. The vast majority of them walk in, hang up their coat, and sit down and do the job they love. They're going to get that done first. Hey, I got 2 things to do today. I may as well start my day well. And they jump in and they do the job that they love. And they do that first. The problem with that is that imagine that each of these projects are sort of, 4-hour projects. Well, if you have a 4-hour project that you love, followed by a 4-hour project that you really don't like, how long do you think the 4-hour project that you love is going to take? It's going to be 6 to 8 hours. Easy, right? What if you swapped it? What if you had a little self-discipline? What if, as M. Scott Peck said in Load Less Travel, he talks so much about delayed gratification, right? What if you did a little delayed gratification, one of the probably most important traits for a human to learn, and what if you walked into your office and you did the project that you hate first, and then the project you love? How long do you think it would take you to do the 4-hour project that you hate if you were going to reward yourself with a project you love? You think you could get it done in 3 hours? Maybe 2? That is the first stage in prioritization. Is I think Brian Tracy calls it eat that frog. Get the icky stuff out of the way first and reward yourself with the stuff that you love the most. So that's first level of prioritization at a day-to-day basis. Now, when we talk about prioritization in the business, well, every industry, every business is a little bit different. But what I want to suggest to you is that if you right now are worrying about cash flow on a tactical basis, in other words, wow, we need to go generate sales, so let's go knock on doors, let's make the calls, let's launch a campaign. If it's all like tactical, then what you're doing is adrenalizing your business. And what inception marketing is really going to be doing is unadrenalizing your business, getting you to a place where you've got these marketing campaigns and funnels where when you need new prospects, when you need to bring in new prospects and new clients, you basically are going to turn the funnel on and you're going to bring in business. So my question is, how highly would you prioritize that if you believed you could do it? The trouble is most people don't recognize that they can do that because they've been taught marketing in the old world. They've been taught features and benefits selling. They've been taught graphic design. They've been taught design the best website you can. Let me give you a little clue, all of you. If you like your website, it's probably wrong. If you like your logo, there's a chance it's wrong. And that's because you are not your target audience. You do not have the problems that your audience, that your target has. If you understand, if you are, for example, let's say you're, if you're selling financial services, right? Well, you probably already understand your investment strategy. So what that means is you don't have the same concerns and questions about financial strategy that your prospects have. And so if your ad looks really good to you, it looks good to somebody who doesn't have financial strategy problems, right? Does that make sense? So what you want to do is take a slightly different view of that whole issue and really start to think in terms of, hey guys, you did exactly as I asked. Apparently I didn't clear the board. Thankfully, I haven't started recording on the other side. Thank you very much. Who was the first person to do that? I want to know.
Oh, we'll have to look back.
Check it out. I want to know who the first person to do it. Or if that's too difficult, just pick one of them. All right. So thank you very much for that question. I hope that gives you some depth. And Amber, I want to, what I really want to say to you is this, is that a little bit of time invested in developing really good marketing campaigns, a little bit of time invested in that really is like creating a permanent resource where you can just turn it on and generate revenue for yourself. And I really want you to think about what it's like. Like, for example, when we are doing WildFit launches, we turn them on and we attract a lot of business that comes in almost entirely from referrals. But then we get to a place where we say, hey, you know what? We actually need to turn that funnel off. We have one funnel that we can only turn on for days. Really, it's one funnel we can only turn on for days, and that is where we give away free public training speaking. So I do this 3-part program on public speaking, and I teach people how because I used to be so terrified of speaking, and I was not a natural in any way at presentations or speaking. I just wasn't. It was hard for me. And I studied it, and I watched some of the greatest speeches of all time. I broke them down. I looked at what worked. I studied the best trainers in the world. I really went after it. And so a lot of my business clients started asking me how they could learn to do presentations better. And so we put up a marketing funnel where we created this three-part training on how to do some public speaking. And we do that whenever I'm going to go on tour. So for example, in, I want to say October of this year, I'm going to do a tour through most of Western Canada, maybe a little bit of Eastern Canada, where I'm going to be teaching public speaking. One of the ways that we will populate that tour is by turning on that funnel. And we will turn that funnel on, and then we will have to turn it off because we don't have the capacity to follow up with every single person that comes in there. That's ideally what I want for you with your inceptive campaigns, is automated marketing channels that are bringing revenue to you so you don't have to think about it. Amber, to answer your question, imagine it this way. What if it was possible to invest a little bit of time in developing strategic marketing campaigns so in the future you didn't have to think about revenue at all? That's the idea. Thea Munoz, you were the first one to remind me to clear my whiteboard before we went live recording the product. And so we're going to give, you know what we're going to do? She's going to get the first Business Freedom 365 giveaway that we've done. And so we're going to give away the Business Freedom 365 program to Thea for being the first one to help me to remind me to clear the board. Thank you. Guys, see, paying attention, interaction, it pays. And Thea, just so you know what we're giving you, because a lot of times it's been a few hours since I described it, I want you to know what you're getting is really the very best work that I've done in business coaching and business education for the last 5 years. And what we've done is we've gone into the studio and recorded this as a week-by-week transformation of your company for an entire year. So each week you're going to focus on, again, like for example, 1 week alone is dedicated to how to make sure you never, ever, ever get sued by your employees, or if you do somehow get sued by one, that you don't lose. There's a whole week on how to make that happen. That could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's another one. There's another week where we do something called iceberg spotting. And that one exercise could actually save your whole business. In fact, one of our clients wrote to me one day and he said that I'd literally saved his company because on Friday something happened that was going to put him out of business. But because he'd done that whole project on the icebergs, he was ready for it when it happened. And not only did it not put him out of business, but it made him stronger. So you are going to get that program, and it really, truly, by the end of the year, you will have a completely different business life, and you will either have business freedom, or you'll be so much closer to it than you are now, that you'll be able to spend a lot more time with your family, you'll be able to go on vacation at will, and you'll be building equity in your company rather than maybe being more self-employed if that's where you are today. So anyway, thanks very much for helping us out with that, and I'm glad that I got to give that to you first. Would anybody else like that? Is there anybody else interested in me giving them that? We'll see. We'll see. All right.
Cat just exploded.
All right. I'm going to jump into recording, so we got to go quiet on the set again. And we're now doing module 4, which is market research. Okay, let me just have a quick drink here. We might also later talk about product integration. I'm just kidding. I'm having a drink of water. All right. Wow, it's so funny to have the two different, you guys, and then it's interesting. All right, let's jump right in. Are we rolling both? Rolling. Rolling. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, we are. Just move this. Okay.
Okay.
No, that's not that much better. There we go. It's not really. It's good.
Security.
It's good.
Yeah. Security, get that woman out. All right. So let's jump in module 4. Hi, welcome back. I'm Eric Edmeades. This is Inception Marketing Video Training, and we're now on module 4, which is all about market research. Let's recap what we've done so far. We took a look at what our overall target market or overall target markets might be. We subdivided that into some ideal target markets. Then we took a look at some psychological profiling of those markets so we could really get a sense of who they are. Now we're going to move into market research. Market research may well be one of the most important things that you could ever do for your company, and it's one of the least often done things for a company. Market research is so very valuable, but not, I'm talking about in the traditional way, where you're doing market research to see if the market is interested in your product. I'm not talking about that type of market research. I'm talking about genuine research about the market, where what you're looking for is nuggets of information that might be so interesting and appealing that you can use it to engage your audience, and also that you can use it to move your audience toward a purchasing decision. So let me break down what that means. We had a client come to us I want to say I was doing some work with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes some years ago, and a client came to us and they had a problem. What happened was that they were selling tiles, tiles to put in houses, and they were largely selling those tiles to home builders. So the home builders were buying the tiles from them wholesale and then putting them into the houses. The challenge they had was that a Chinese company had started importing really low-cost Chinese manufactured tiles. And they were selling at a retail price lower than our client could even produce their tiles for. It was absolutely going to put them out of business. And they could watch it happening. Their business was being eroded away right in front of them. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't going to put them out of business in 6 months, but they were definitely going to be out of business in 2 or 3 years if things continued the way they were. And so they did something very, very smart. What do many companies do when they start getting concerned about cash flow? They start cutting off funding to their marketing. That's when you know a company's over. When they stop putting money into marketing, it's over. Like, that is not how you save your company. You save your company by putting your resources into marketing and developing new streams of revenue, because revenue is the blood flow of your company. And so what we did in that case, they engaged us to put together a marketing plan for them to try to overcome the situation. I want to be clear, they regarded it as an impossible project. How possibly could we convince home builders that it's worth spending so much more money on this tile when they could get the cheap stuff right out of China? And so the first thing to do was to conduct a huge amount of market research. And in doing that market research, a lot of different things were turned up. A lot of interesting things about housing trends and taxes and all kinds of interesting things about the way houses were being built. This was in Australia. And what was interesting is that one of the little nuggets that popped up in the research is that there was some legislation pending. It had been approved, but it was going to take maybe 2 years to be enacted. But the legislation was going to mandate, if I remember correctly, a 7-year holistic warranty on houses that were being built. In other words, if you were a home builder and you're building houses, you would now have to provide a holistic 7-year warranty on everything that you put in the house. So if you supplied the house with a microwave oven, you would have to supply a 7-year warranty with it. If you supplied the house with tiles, then those tiles would have to be covered by a 7-year warranty as well. This is interesting. By the way, do you think it's going to affect what home builders put into homes? Yeah, they're going to stop putting appliances in so much unless they can get the warranties backed up by the manufacturer. So it was a big change that was going to come, but it was like a lot of that type of legislation. It was under the radar and nobody really knew it was coming. But by doing market research, we turned up that it was coming. So now, how can our client use that? Well, what he ended up doing is designing a direct mail campaign. Sorry, guys, we had a little bit of a sound issue. I'm going to re-record that section. Hang in. Take 2, as it were. So what our client ended up doing is undertaking a direct mail campaign, and it worked a little bit like this. It started with a press release. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about press releases when we talk about engagement pitches, but in this case, I want to be really clear. Most companies issue really bad press releases. And the way you can tell is that most press releases are about the company or about their products and services. New product launched, new CFO hired, new building moved into. If you're writing those kind of press releases, there's only two groups of people reading them. One is your competitors and the other one is your mom. Like, those are not useful press releases. What we did is show the client how to write a really effective press release. And so that press release was different. That press release said, new legislation bound to rock home builders' worlds, or something like that. It was like basically announcing that this new legislation was coming and it was going to completely transform the world for private home building. And then the press release went on to describe the legislation, when it was approved, what was covered in the legislation, and the potential impact that it was going to have on home builders that now had to provide this holistic warranty, right? Okay, then in there was a quote from the tile manufacturer that we were representing, right? There's a quote in there, and the quote says something like, while we recognize that this legislation will place a very heavy burden on home builders, we also recognize that it provides a level of security for consumers that is definitely justified when making such a major purchase as a home. So it's a really nice quote. It doesn't sell anything. It just says, hey, this person knows what's going on and they're an expert and they've been quoted here. And so now they sent that press release out. Send that press release out and it gets picked up because it's interesting. It's not some blurb about your new product or service. It's actually interesting. And what publications might run it? Well, publications that home builders buy. So magazines that have to do with that, So magazines that have to do with home building, architectural digest, you know, that kind of stuff. And then when it gets picked up, it's going to get picked up as an article. And if a press release is written really well, it's already done most of the job for the author of the article. In other words, most of the article is already written. They can just take out the key pieces of information. Oh, look, there's a quote there I could already use. Are you with me? So now this story gets out there and it ends up in various publications. And so that's interesting already, because now there's going to be home builders who are going to see this thing and go, wow, that's really interesting. And they're going to see the name of the CEO of the tile company. And that's not going to close any sales, but it is an impression, and it is a good impression. But that's not where we get really, really strategic. Where we get strategic is we go out and buy 1,000 copies of one of those publications. Yeah. And then what we do, and listen to me very carefully, is we tear that article out of the publication. We do not cut it out nicely. We tear it out with a rough edge down the side. I'll explain why in a moment. Then we take a pen, probably a bright color, at least blue, if not even red, and we highlight a couple of the important points on the page. And then we write on there, I saw this and thought of you. Let's have lunch to discuss. Then you take that and roughly fold it up and you stick it in an envelope. You handwrite the envelope and you send it out to your home builders. Now, this may sound like a whole lot of work. That's what interns are for, right? But the point is, by cutting it out rough, by handwriting on it, by handwriting the envelope, when the home builder receives that, they're going, wow, this was personally sent to me. They're engaged. They open it up, they read the article. You've now created a bunch of credibility and authority because this article was probably new to them, or if it wasn't new, it gave them more information about something they were already concerned about. And there's a quote in there, which is not one of the things that we circled. There's highlights where we've circled stuff that might be of interest to them. And then there's a note, hey, let's get together and have some lunch, and a business card. And they're like, yeah, I want to talk to this person about that. Now we've got engagement. We've built credibility. We've built authority. And it's at that point that we're able to facilitate a conversation where we are able to inform the home builder, that our tiles have always come, and they actually had, coincidentally, where they have always come with a holistic 7-year warranty, which means you can feel very safe to put our tiles in the home, rather than some of the other knockoffs that have made their way to the market lately. Now, do you see what I mean about playing chess instead of checkers? In the old, or darts even, you see, in the old day, you would just take out an ad and you say, our tiles are better, we have a big warranty, the other ones are not going to last as long, they fade in the sun. You know, it's the old style. No, now we go after something very different, where we are warming them up and getting them curious about us and getting them to want to buy. So let's talk about how to do and how not to do market research. We don't do market research on Google. Look, I'm kidding, because of course you can do some. Matter of fact, there's one very useful type of market research you can do on Google. I'll tell you right now, it's fabulous. It's not the results though. You see, the problem with the results on Google is many of them were bought and paid for. And I don't mean that they're sponsored content. I mean that somebody paid to have the copy written, paid to have it SEO'd, and paid to have it put where it was put, so that when you search for what you're looking for, it came up. So a huge amount of what you get from Google is paid content. If you're curious, for example, about whether microwave ovens are good or bad for you, whether the radiation is good or bad for you, whether it's good or bad for your food, if you go type that in, what you're going to see is a whole ton of arguments that completely argue that microwave ovens are completely harmless and they're super good for you, and they even improve the nutritional availability of your food. And whether you believe that or not, what you need to know is the vast majority of those articles were funded by who? Well, manufacturers of microwave ovens. I'm not saying what they're saying isn't true. That's another debate for another time. What I'm saying is that when you do market research on Google, you're not necessarily getting good research. What you're getting is bought and paid for content. But one type of research you can do on Google that's very fascinating is you can type in the beginning of a phrase in the search of Google, and the predictive text will then tell you what other people are asking. So, for example, recently I did this where I thought I wanted to find out how people felt about being employed, because a lot of our prospective clients that want to start businesses one day or want to learn about public speaking are currently in jobs. So I go to Google and I type in, my job makes me, and just watch what Google says. My job makes me sick. My job makes me depressed. My job makes me unhappy. My job makes me want to kill myself. I mean, do it yourself. Those were the answers I got. By the way, do you think that makes it interesting for me in terms of now knowing what the market is thinking out there, my job makes me sick. Well, now I can use that content. I can use that content. Does your job make you feel sick? Yes, I just told Google that a few days ago. So you can use that type of research on Google, which is very strategic and very handy. What I would suggest, though, is the next type of market research is where you have, the next type of research you have is where you want cited, documented research so that you're able to add really solid credibility. So that's another type of market research you want to do. So again, you can do this on Google, but remember that most of what you're going to find there, unless you really are a good researcher, most of what you're going to find is bought and paid for stuff. And you want to be really careful that if you're ever quoting statistics, that you absolutely have the source. If you're quoting a new fact or you're quoting some solid piece of information, you need to know the source of the information, because nothing will hurt your credibility more than pretending you have credibility with something and then it turns out you don't. I had the funniest thing happen to me once. It wasn't funny at the time, but I was doing a talk on marketing in London, England, many years ago. I was working with Tony Robbins at the time, and they had asked me to do a presentation using somebody else's slides because that person couldn't be at that event. I was doing other content for their workshops, and they suddenly said, well, Eric, could you do this other talk? So I looked at the slides and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. It's an emergency, I'll jump in. And so I jumped up on stage and I'm doing this presentation, and the slides have a bunch of market data on them that I'm going to be able to quote. Now, I fundamentally don't need slides when I'm doing it. If you've ever seen me do a public presentation, A, you'll hardly ever see me use slides. And B, if I do, you'll see that they're strategic evidentiary slides, not generally, not a bunch of text that I'm reading from. But in this case, it was specific market data that was contextually important to the presentation. And so I was looking at the slides and I'd have to read them. Well, what was really interesting is that one of the slides was cut off just slightly. Every single slide had the source for the data that I'd quoted. It said, just in very small print, like you would think the people in the audience couldn't even see it. It's just a tiny little thing. It said source. One of the slides was cut off and the source wasn't there. And a guy raised his hand and he goes, what's your source for that? And in that moment, despite the fact that every other piece of data I'd given them, there was a source for, in that moment, my credibility was damaged by not having the source. Now, fortunately, I knew the source, so I was able to quote it anyway, and I was able to save the day. But it shows you that the market is out there wanting you to be credible about the information you give. So when you do market research, it's really important that you get solid, real information, and that you then are able to source that information. Let's talk a little bit about the practical deployment of your research, because I know this is slightly drier content we're doing so far. Bear with me, this is very important. And I want to give you an example from Chet Holmes. Some of you will be familiar with Chet. If you're not, I highly recommend his work, and I highly recommend his book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. He is a phenomenal, well, he's a very good friend of mine. He recently passed away, not so recently anymore. And he taught some great things about marketing, and he was doing a project, and this really solidified my belief in market research. He was working on a project with another friend of mine, Gene McNaughton, and they were working with a large home builder in Mexico. And the home builder wanted to massively improve their market penetration and get a lot more clients. So one of the very early steps on was to do very, very deep market research. And so they did. And they turned up some different little nuggets, right? And by the way, when you're doing market research, nuggets are things that make you or would make your prospects go, that's really interesting at a minimum, right? As long as they have that reaction, it's a nugget. And so here's some of the nuggets they turned up. It turned out that the culture in Mexico was such that there are many, many people in Mexico living in three generational homes. In other words, there were grandparents and grandchildren and the children between living in one home. Interesting. It turned out that something like 60% of the people who could qualify for a mortgage in Mexico did not own a home or were living in one of these three-dimensional or these three generational homes where they weren't the homeowner. It also turned out that when people lived in three generational homes, that they missed a lot more time off work sick, that they were ill more often. It also turned out that those people, people that were renting were also sick more often, and that those people tended to not stay in their jobs as long. Homeowners stayed in their jobs longer. These are all just interesting nuggets that came up. So now the question is, how do we use them? How do we use the nuggets? Well, the first thing was when they began to look at this, they realized that, hey, we're not going to go after the whole tactical just sell homes. Instead, they would go to home fairs, and it's like everybody else is like, come buy our home. We use the best quality wood. We have the longest warranty. Features, benefits, features, benefits. They had entire displays and brochures and slides up about how to improve the health of your family at a housing fair. And so all these people are walking around and they're sick and tired of all the booths that are just selling homes. And they see this one that says, how can you improve the health of your family? Wow, that's really interesting. And so they came in there and they learned that when there's 3 generations in the home, there was a lot more sickness in the home. In fact, there was a much higher incidence of sudden infant death syndrome when there were 3 generations in the home. Nobody knows why, there just was. And that people missed more time off work sick. And all of a sudden, people started seeing this content and started thinking to themselves, I think it's time that we move out. I think it's time that we got our own home. So young couples are suddenly going, we don't want to live in a home with our parents and our grandparents. We want to move out. And so it started driving a market for people wanting to buy homes. Isn't this interesting, right? So remember, we aren't going after people interested in buying a home. We're going after people. Well, in this case, these people may not have themselves been interested in buying a home, but all of a sudden they're thinking, maybe we should be buying one for ourselves. Maybe they even went to a fair like that looking for a home for the whole family, and suddenly they realized, no, we don't want 1 home, we want 3. We don't want to live like this anymore. Because suddenly they realized there was a tangible reason for doing it another way. Then some of the other data came up, and the other data that I mentioned, for example, that people who rent seem to miss more days off work sick, and people who rent seem to be a little bit more flighty about their employment. They don't stay in jobs as long. That's interesting. I don't know how we'd use that, unless, of course, we started thinking about who might be interested in that information. In this case, it's an indirect ideal target market. It's an influencer. The influencer in this case might be employers. Think about it. If you're an employer, you've got a big factory with 500 employees, and I can come to you and show you that there's a way that you can get your employees to stay employed with you for twice as long as they do on average. And if I can get them to miss half as much time off work sick, are you interested? Yes, you are, because that speaks to your bottom line of profitability. Look, one of the most expensive things as a business owner is the recruiting and training and retention of staff. Every time you lose somebody you didn't want to lose and you have to recruit the next person, it's extremely expensive. So if we can go to an employer and show them how to get their employees to stay employed twice as long and to miss half as many days off sick, they're going to be intrigued by that. And so that's exactly what Gene and Chet did. They went in there and they showed this to the big, bottling plants and manufacturing facilities. And all of a sudden, those people became very motivated to get their employees to become home owners because they wanted them to stay employed longer and wanted them to miss less days off work sick. So now they were able to go in and organize big home ownership fairs like, hey guys, if you're an employee and you're interested in owning a home, your employer is organizing this thing you can come to where there's going to be some displays and information about mortgages. And it turns out that your employer is even going to create a program to help you get your mortgage. And so instead of selling 1 house at a time, all of a sudden you can sell 20, 30, 50, or 100 houses at a time. And not to put too fine a point on it, I want to be really clear. Both Gene and Chet are absolutely brilliant at what they do, and in Chet's case, what he did. And I want to be really clear that the owner of the company credited them with adding $800 million in extra sales because of using education-based marketing, going out and doing really solid market research. So market research absolutely needs to be done. For some of you, it's going to be a matter of going out and surveying your existing market. You don't have a big budget for research, and so it's really easy. You can go to Google Forms, you can create beautiful surveys, send them out to your client, and boom, you can get market research back. We do this constantly. For any of you who have been through our WildFit program, you've probably ended up being invited to do one of our surveys. That survey is designed, first of all, to find out whether or not the program suited you. Secondly, it's to find out how we can improve the program in future iterations. And thirdly, it's to find out what got you interested in signing up for the program in the first place so that we can refine our marketing to reach more people. We are constantly surveying. One of the best sources of market research is going to be from your clients. Another great source of market research is going to be to go out and get yourself a research company to do this for you. And some of you have larger businesses. I highly recommend going out and doing that. In fact, what we'll do is we'll provide you some references for companies that could do that kind of market research for you. There aren't very many of them that do it at the level that I'd recommend, but we will share with you the companies that we admire most in that area so that you can contact them directly if you're looking for market research. Your homework assignment for this module is to conduct some basic market research on some of the ideal target markets that you've been working on, right? So far, you've picked a couple of ideal target markets. You've done some psychological evaluation of those target markets, either a direct or an indirect. And now what I want you to do is do some loose market research. Try the little Google trick that I showed you. Or go and do a little Google research and just kind of dig around a little bit and see what you can learn. But I want you to remember an important thing, a really important thing. The market research does not have anything to do necessarily with your product or service. It has everything to do with the prospect. The more you know about the prospect and their life and their market and their circumstances, the easier it's going to be for you to create engagement and inception for them. So do a little bit of, this is a light part of the exercise because really for many of you, market research is something that's going to be a more complex thing. And if you want to do a little bit of bonus homework here, create a survey. And right now, if you don't know how to use Google Forms or any of the other services that offer that, it's really simple. Take out a piece of paper and write down what are all the questions you'd like to ask prospects if you have it. And then you can do market surveys one of two ways. Have lunch with some of your customers or have a Skype call with them or create a form and send it out to them and say, please complete all this because it's going to help us to improve our business even more. So however you want to sample around and play with doing a little bit of market research, make sure you get that done because it's going to help you when we get to the next step. Because in the next step, you're actually going to want to pick one ideal target market to do the balance of this with. Right now, so you've been looking at a couple of different ideal target markets. You've looked at the psychological profiling of them. Now you're going to look at the market a little bit. And from that, you're going to choose one ideal target market for what we're going to do tomorrow. And what we're going to do tomorrow is engagement pitches. Sorry, let me do that differently. So far what you've done is you've done a, so far what you've done is you figured out an overall target market. You've then taken a look at some of the ideal target markets within that, indirect and direct. Then you've done some psychological evaluation. What's going on for them? What's interesting for them? Now you're going to do a little bit of market research. And all of that is going to help you because for the next module, you're going to want to pick one ideal target market. Remember, you can do this over and over and over again, but to get the most out of this program, you're going to pick one ideal target market for the next module. And the next module is all about creating engagement. In the next module, you're going to find out how we create really highly effective engagement where you are able to get a lot more attention from the market, where you can break through all the marketing noise. Remember, one of the reasons that marketing has become so difficult right now is that everybody is out there marketing, 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 marketing. And you've probably heard speakers use this example before where, you know, one day you go out and buy a car and then all of a sudden that car is everywhere. And the question is, where was it before and why couldn't you see it? That's not correct, actually. The truth is you always did see it. If you didn't see it, you would have tried to park where it was parked. You would have tried to turn when it was coming. Like, you know, you could see it. But the issue is you couldn't see it for what it was because humans are extremely good at generalizing information. And so these days, humans have gotten really good at generalizing anything that looks like marketing. The minute it looks like marketing, they just don't even see it anymore. And so what we're going to do in the next module is we're going to talk about how to break through that fog. And really, you're going to see that where one of your old marketing campaigns may have created this much engagement, we're going to show you quite seriously how to create this much engagement. And it's going to be very, very powerful for you. So make sure that you show up on time early because that's the first module. Oh, that's for you guys. It's not, I don't have to tell these guys in a recorded program to show up early. I've got both audiences in my head. So make sure that you get this market research piece done and get one target audience chosen so that when we move on to the next module, you can get the most power out of your engagement pitch. Okay, we'll cut that there. We're going to have to do, I think I had too many tomorrow references in there, and we're probably going to have to do some pickups on that.
Okay.
So we'll have to look at that content. Anyway, I'm mostly happy with that section, and I want to jump into Q&A with everybody else, so cool. All right, guys, are you having fun? I hope so. I'm going to have a drink of water, and then I'm going to start taking your questions. So if you guys can feed me questions, that'd be great. Is it possible for all of us to see behind the scenes at this end? We would like to see the team and technology behind it. I'll make you guys a deal. Right away, at the end of this Q&A, how long do we have, guys?
20 minutes.
We got about 20 minutes, and right at the end of the 20 minutes, I'll go onto my Facebook profile, and I will do, no, we'll do actually on the Business Freedom page. So if you go to the Business Freedom Facebook page, we will do a live broadcast from there, show you what the whole set looks like, and maybe even answer a few more questions. All right, so.
Oh, hang on, I'm just getting you. What slide? Go to 17.
Okay, so Francis says, should surveys be short with notice upfront of shortness to obtain better volume responses, or should you conduct long surveys and risk volume and quality? In other words, the short version of that question is, are surveys better off to be short or long? Well, Francis, it's very contextual, and it depends on how much credibility you already have with the market before you're doing the survey. If it's a completely cold survey, then yes, a shorter survey might be useful. If it's a longer survey, the one thing that you can do is break the survey up into parts so that they see progress. In other words, they complete the first 3 questions and hit submit, and then they go through to the next page. Well, now they feel like they've had progress and they want to keep going. So by shortening it up that way, you can, by shortening up the sections, you can keep the engagement a little bit higher that way. But you know, I think it has a lot to do with the level of credibility you have. If they're for existing clients, then I would be more inclined to go with a slightly longer survey, because you really want to get, it's like a gold mine of information. So I'd be inclined to maybe go with a slightly longer survey. If it's for cold traffic, then I might be tempted to go with a shorter survey structure. Also, incidentally, and this will come up tomorrow when we go into engagement pitches. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about something we call reverse opt-in that some of you are probably familiar with. But that's where you use a survey where it gives them a basic level of results. But if they really want the full thing, then they now need to opt in, and they actually need to engage with you. And we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. You'll really like that. So Francis, thanks very much for that question. Who's next? Helena. How in-depth should the market survey be, taking into consideration that we only have 24 hours for the next section? Yeah, you know, in terms of your homework for now, bear in mind, people that are watching this might take a week between modules, and they can do that. All I would suggest to you is if you kind of committed to yourself, like, you know, just like say half an hour or an hour of just doing a little bit of market research just to get a sense of it, then I think that's what that basic level of research, I think, would just get you noticing what research actually looks like online. Remember, one of the ways to do that research is to imagine this. What are your prospects typing into Google? Not only because of the predictive stuff that I said before, but what are they asking Google? Because once you know what they're asking Google, you know, then you can find out what Google's telling them. And so if you just play around with that for half an hour, it's going to give you a grounding in market research, just a little bit. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that again tomorrow. Thanks, Helena.
You can go to 19. Yeah, it's a different question, same person, but equally good question. Okay, next question is, how can you engage people in responding to your survey? Oh, wow. There's so many different ways, Helena. Again, it depends on whether you're talking about warm or cold traffic. But, you know, for example, if you were a restaurant and you wanted to do surveying for people, well, you want to get them now, right? You want to get them like now before they leave the restaurant. And so some restaurants at a very superficial level just leave the survey on the table. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but sometimes they just have it right there. And not higher end restaurants, but it's just like, you know, they're surveying for cleanliness and all that kind of stuff, whatever. What I would suggest is that you be a bit more strategic about that. If you, for example, had a high-end restaurant, I'd be almost inclined to go up and give the prospects a greeting card, and the greeting card would go in and it would say, hey, if you could take a moment to just answer these 10 questions, when you come back the next time, we'll give you free starters. Right? So you could kind of like motivate them to answer the question. If you're doing something similar online, you can do the same thing. You could do a giveaway of some kind. You can also, with some surveys, people are so curious about the results of the surveys that you can simply offer them the results of the overall survey as the kind of reward to increase their engagement. Some surveys that are more private to your business, you might not want to share the reward or share the results. So those are a couple of different ways that you can engage people in responding to the survey. Another big way is responding. What I mean is that if you survey people and then you acknowledge them later, either you acknowledge them directly personally or you acknowledge out to the group, then people suddenly become more inclined to be willing to do surveys in the first place. You know, they did a survey, they responded, they saw you improve your business, maybe you acknowledge them for their idea, then the next time a survey comes out, they're really going to be intrigued by that. I'm also a big fan of surveying your staff. Right? It's a big, I think that's a very important thing to do is survey your staff if you've got staff in your company. And the same thing can be done there. We created, years ago in one of my companies, we created a survey for cost saving measures. We just surveyed the whole company. How do you think we could save money? One guy turned up with a way that we could save about $3,000 a month. We did it. Like the very next month, we started saving $3,000 a month. So guess what? He got a pretty good bonus, right? So the more you incentivize people to complete surveys, I think the more likely it is that you get that kind of engagement. Great question, thanks. Let's see. Okay, Gabor, I guess you're talking about research on the concerns and problems of the ideal target market here, not testing the product, right? Yes, yes. You can do some of that traditional market research, testing the product in the marketplace and stuff, but no, what we're talking about here is research about the market, right? Not research about the product. It's a different kind of market research. So if you take a look at the example I gave in the recording of Chet and